Hello, good evening, and good day, everybody, and welcome to the Ask Abhijit show. Today we discuss geopolitics and history. I'm going to take questions that you have asked in the comments. So, before we get into the questions, let us see who all is there on the live chat with us tonight or today. I can see Nirvana Shanks, Korichiwa, and thank you very much. Namaste Pranam from Singapore. Hello, Mac4, J1U, Sam the Gamer, Soldier Boy, Meow, Pratham, Namaste, Mahita Bushetti, hello. Gahlawat says Narendra from Tokyo. Narendra from Tokyo, good to have from Toronto. From Toronto. Well, good to have you. Thank you so much for being on the live stream. Somi, hello. Om Bekerikar, good to see you. Hello. Priyanshi Sood, Om. Hello, good to see you. Geopolitical Dubai, good evening. And Geopolitical Dubai is here from Indore. Real Painter says meow meow. Abhishek Srivastav, hello. Anandam, Sam the Gamer, Tanmay Deshpande, Soldier Boy, Sam the Gamer, Priyanshi Sood, Brute Cold, Pratik Vora, Manhattan, Soldier Boy, Advait Ashwini, good evening. Chaitanya Manuja, hello. Navanita Dash, namaste. Rekha Humble, Jai Shri Ram, Sam the Gamer, Chaitanya Manuja, Jimmy Lee, Vande Mataram, Minimalist Maverick, hello. AJ Raul, hello. Mac4, namaste pranam. Who else do we have? Rahul Himthani is from Mumbai. Hello. Sagar Dadibani from Karnataka. Good to have you. Advait Ashwani. Ayush Singh, pranam. Raghuvir is here from Jodhpur. Lathangi Suresh from Chola Land. Good to have you from Chola Land, indeed. Revenant Voltsat. Anshika Yada. Hello. Good boys, 93931. Ayush from IIT Gandhinagar. Hello, good to have you. Shivam Thakur, Vaibhav Gupta, Priyanka Javalia, hello, good evening. Rahul Himthani from Mumbai, hello. Crazy Brain, good to have you. Real Vladimir Putin is back. Good to have you as well. Reddy, always ready. Vamshi Kalem, hello, okay, it's Vamshi Kalem. Good to see you again. Krishna of the Suriname, Netherlands, always good to have you, Krishna Ji. And everyone else, I won't be able to greet all of you individually as always, but Abhishek Shukla is here from Kanpur. Raghuvir is here from Jodhpur. Rasputin says namaste. Well, namaste, Rasputin ji. Shivam Thakur, hello. And Amisha Mishra, good evening. Good to have you, ma'am. Mahita Bushetti says Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna indeed. Hare Krishna. Zin's Corner, Jai Hind. Om Sood, namaste. Avirup Shorkar, hello. Debajoti Gope, General Subothai, Anand V, hi. Himank, Sam the Gamer, and everyone else. McLevin, hello. Good to see you. Okay, let's get going with the questions. What questions do we have? I will first deal with some geopolitics questions, and then I shall deal with some history questions. So what do we have? What are the questions that we have? Let's get going. Let's start. Let's begin with the questions. What do we have? What pressing issues concern us today? Let's see. Ayush Singh says, what is with the recent failures of ISRO? People are going hyper, saying it was a sabotage. What's my opinion? What are the causes, and was this really a sabotage? Considering the rocket was launching military satellites. Real Vladimir Putin says, recent rocket failure by ISRO looks like a sabotage. First, it was important for India's national security as well as ISRO's international reputation as a reliable space agency for satellite launches. Secondly, these type of failures by ISRO are very rare. So the rocket that failed is ISRO's PSLV rocket. So the PSLV rocket had a string of almost like 18-20 successful launches. It was so successful, its launches had become boring. Everyone knew it would go flawlessly. And then the last two launches have failed. It's always the same problem. Something happens, something goes wrong at the third stage. So let's just quickly take a look at ISRO, the PSLV, the way the PSLV has been performing. Last 20 PSLV launches, success, failure. Let's see what it says. Okay. So last 20 PSLV launches up to 2026, ISRO, 2 consecutive failures. Before that, the PSLV was incredibly reliable, most missions being fully successful. the last two launches have failed. 2026, January 12, and 2025, May 18. May 18 was the first major failure in over a decade. Third stage, 21 consecutive successful flights before this. And as you can see, we are having very few rocket launches now in India. May 18, 2025, and then January 12, 2026, PSLV. Obviously, we have other rockets, but as you can see, India is not launching a lot of rockets anymore. Uh, so yeah, we've had two consecutive failures. Both time it's been a glitch in the third stage. Now the question is, what happened? This incredibly reliable rocket, 21 consecutive successful launches. Why should things start going wrong with that? Makes no sense, right? It's a design the ISRO engineers have perfected. It works flawlessly every time, and now suddenly two consecutive failures. Same issue. Something goes wrong with the third stage. Is this sabotage? Well, look back at the past. We've had issues like this. For example, in the 1980s, when the French were developing the Ariane rocket, they had multiple failures, which was then traced back to a Soviet spy, a Soviet saboteur, and all of that is now conveniently buried. You look for information today, it won't show you anything. But I've seen that. I was a kid in the 1980s. And if you're in Europe, this came on the news. So you had this sort of thing before, okay? And if you remember, a couple of years ago, I had made a video about the possibility that Chandrayaan-2 may have been hacked and sabotaged, right? And I had given evidence that indicates there's a possibility, significant possibility, that Chandrayaan-2 was actually sabotaged. It did not just fail because of some normal issue. And now we have PSLV, in India's most successful, most reliable workhorse rocket, failing completely out of the blue 2 times in succession. And each time it failed, it was carrying sensitive satellites that are important for India's national security, right? So that obviously raises the possibility that this may have been a sabotage. The other launches were, well, non-national security satellite launches, but the past two failures, the two consecutive failures, the rocket was carrying satellites connected with India's national security, military satellites, so to say, military applications. So, do I know what's happened? I haven't analyzed this in detail. The government will obviously set up an inquiry. ISRO will do an inquiry. It will put out some kind of, report of the inquiry, possibly in the public domain, maybe not. But whatever will be put out in the public domain, it may not be the entire story, right? Excuse me. Because of security reasons. Some things have to be kept classified. So we in the public, what can we assume what happened? What I can say is that, look, there are multiple issues. First of all, it is very clear now that India is not taking the space program seriously at all. The government of India is essentially treating the space program as something that should be kept on life support. Have 3 or 4 rocket launches a year, maybe 5 maximum or 6 maximum, and that's about it. The Chinese launch more than 100 rockets every year. SpaceX launches hundreds of rockets every year. SpaceX launches more rockets in a week than India launches in a year. And we are not developing any major new rocket. It's all iterative, incremental progress. Why can't India develop a rocket that's like 10 times more powerful than the GSLV? Why not? Right? So India is not taking space seriously. The government of India has decided, for whatever reason, to just keep the space program on life support. Don't do anything ambitious. Just keep it going. Funding is minimal. I've been saying this for a long time, that ISRO is starved of funding. ISRO is made to do missions on a shoestring budget. I have said this multiple times in the past few years. I've said this on other podcasts outside of this channel too. I've said this on the Beer Biceps channel, Ranveer Labadia. And then Ranveer interviewed Dr. Somnath, the then head of ISRO. And Ranveer asked Dr. Somnath about the criticism I've been making, that ISRO, not the criticism, but the point I've been making, that ISRO it is starved of money. The budgets are very low. And he said that, you know what, the budgets, certain missions are green lighted by the government, and some money is given for that. And if the money is obviously limited, and at the end of the year, sometimes you have to return the money to the government. So that's how it is. I mean, whatever is left over, in case ISRO has been successfully extremely frugal or whatever. So overall, ISRO is starved of funding. Very few rocket launches a year. If you have a perfectly reliable rocket, you want to launch it over and over again, so that no flaws creep into the design and the manufacturing. But if you have a perfectly reliable rocket, but you launch it only 3 times a year, let's say, then there's a big gap between 2 consecutive builds of the rocket. And that increases the possibility that some defects may creep in potentially. So, and people have been putting out pictures of the workmanship on the rocket, on the PSLV rocket, on social media. The workmanship looks shoddy, at least the paint jobs look shoddy. Of course, the paint job doesn't matter. The structural integrity and other characteristics of the rocket are more important. But it looks like there's a lack of pride in the way the rocket is painted, just shabbily, shoddily painted and all. So, looks like the standards aren't what you expect them to be. So what do I think happened? Is it just shoddy workmanship, low standards by ISRO, or is it sabotage? If you ask me, look, I don't have the real information of what's happening inside, behind the scenes. But sitting over here, and as someone who has been tracking the progress of ISRO for a long time, and as somebody who has some understanding of these things, I would say I would give the probability of sabotage at 60% or 65%, and the probability of just a regular failure at 30 to 35%. So I think the likelihood of a sabotage is more than a likelihood of an accident, a normal accident. That's what I believe. Because it's a pattern we are seeing here, and this sort of patterns have happened before. The ISRO has been targeted before. I still believe very strongly that there's a high likelihood that Chandrayaan 2 was sabotaged. Okay, some clowns were mocking me when I put out that video at the time. Where are they now? So I think there's a high likelihood this was a sabotage. Can I prove it? No, because I don't have access to the inside information. The government needs to take this very seriously. And the government needs to take the space program very seriously, not treat it like a stepchild, which is what we are seeing right now. Okay, next. Ritik Pawar says, is the $36 billion deal for just 114 Rafales, a 4.5 generation fighter, not even 5th generation, is this deal really worth it? Or are we making a blunder? First, we could fund our own engine, AMC-8 twin-engine deck-based fighter, Tejas Mark II, etc., with the same amount. Second, are there under-the-hood factors in the deal, and that's why we are not choosing the Sukhoi-57? Look, there are multiple aircraft that are put out there. Okay, first of all, let's deal with the foreign aircraft. You have the Rafale 4.5 generation fighter. Then you have the Sukhoi-57, which is a new fighter plane that the Russians have developed. And then there's the F-35 that the Americans are supposedly offering to India. Well, which one should we go for among these 3? So 2 of these are 5th generation fighter planes, the F-35 and the Sukhoi-57. And the Rafale is a 4.5 generation fighter plane, so slightly inferior. Now, when it comes to these 3 aircraft, what about the F-35? The F-35, it's clear India cannot buy it. India should not buy it. It will be suicidal to buy it, because to even drop a bomb from that fighter plane, you need to take permission from the Americans. That fighter plane comes with all kinds of back doors and kill switches built in. Everyone knows that. It just doesn't make sense, and it's just too expensive. Even if you forget the expenses, you are not in sovereign control of the asset that you paid for. So there's no point buying the F-35. Anyway, it's a flying trash can, like I say, and it will make some people upset. They can go somewhere else. Then you have the Sukhoi-57. Now, why not the Sukhoi-57? The Sukhoi-57 is, it's a pretty good fighter plane from what we hear. But about 20 of these have been built by the Russians so far. Only 20. And they haven't inducted the Sukhoi 57 in large numbers into their own air force, the Russians. So if the Russians haven't still inducted this aircraft in large numbers in their air force, but they are offering to sell it to us, it raises some questions. If it's that good, why don't you have a few hundred of these? Why only 20 or so? So it's not yet. It looks like it is still an aircraft under development. It's not the final version. So typically, you know how aircraft are designed and rolled out. You design an aircraft, a Mark 1 aircraft, and you build maybe 15, 20 of those. And you induct that aircraft into the armed forces, into the Air Force. They fly around, they give you all the feedback. Then you incorporate all the feedback with all the defects and all the strengths and all that into the next version of the aircraft. You build 20 more with all those improvements baked in. Then you induct those 20 into the Air Force. Then you get more feedback from the Air Force as to what can be improved. Then you do a Mark 3 or it's a version 3 of the aircraft. Once version 3 rolls out, it is probably the best you can have. And then whatever improvements you made in version 3, you then retrofit those improvements into the version 1 and version 2 aircraft. So looks like the Sukhoi 50, that's how the world-class air forces do it. In India, we say we want the best aircraft from day one. That's how we do it. In India is very different. India is a fantastic country, isn't it? So that's how the professional air forces do it. They roll out aircraft in small blocks. 20 is for version 1 or Mark 1, 20 more for Mark 2, 20 more for Mark 3. Then you retrofit the improvements for Mark 3 back into Mark 2 and Mark 1. Then you do a Mark 4, or you can start a new family of aircraft. Or maybe you then produced 100 or 200 of Mark 3. That's how we do it in a professional air force. So even if whatever requirements you have, Mark 1 only meets 70% of the requirements, you still induct that into the air force, so that you can get large quantities of data from the flying hours. That's how it's done. So the Sukhoi 57 looks like it's the Mark 1 or the version 1 of the aircraft. Maybe they're gonna improve it over time, and it's not the final version yet. So because the Russians have only inducted about 20 of the Sukhoi 57 in their air force, maybe it's too early to buy that. Now the Rafale. Why the Rafale? We already have 36 Rafales, right? We know how to use the goddamn bird. We know how to use it. Then it's a pretty well. If we are buying more, it means that it's a good one. It's a good aircraft. So buy a bunch more. See, we don't want to have a zoo, a menagerie of 53 different kinds of aircraft. It's a nightmare, logistical nightmare to get the spares, to have the technicians trained in all the different classes of aircraft. You should have 2 or 3 kinds of aircraft at most, right? We have the Jaguar, we have the Mirage, we have the Sukhoi 30, we have the MiG-29, we have the MiG-21, we have the Tejas Mark 1A, then we have the Rafale. I mean, it's already 6-7 aircraft right there. It's already a nightmare. Okay, if you get a Sukhoi, it's part of the same class of birds as the Sukhoi 30. So much of the infrastructure you've built for the Sukhoi 30 can be reused, repurposed for the Sukhoi 57, I'm sure. But that's the issue with the Sukhoi 57. They've only inducted 20, the Russians, which is an issue. So because we already have the Rafale, it performed well apparently from whatever we hear. That's why the government said, okay, let's go for the Rafale. And the deal isn't finalized yet. Whoa, all the Indian media, whatever it's reporting, that we are paying these many 1,000 crore rupees or whatever, the deal hasn't been finalized. We haven't inked any agreement yet. Okay, and whatever the final deal is, it's going to include all the weapon systems, all the missiles, and God knows what else. Apparently, the French are saying that we will not give you access to the source code, etc. So there's a lot of more negotiations that need to be done. We need to have access to the mission computers, so that if we integrate new weapons, Indian weapons into the system, then they should be fully integrable into the system, into the aircraft. So there's a lot more negotiating to be done. And looks like because we are going for the Safran engine that the French that we are co-developing with the French, that's why maybe it makes sense for the Rafale, to go for the Rafale. And of course, you are absolutely right. With all this money that we are spending on the Rafales, we can fund our own engine. But the government, for whatever good reason or bad reason, I'm not sure, we have once again decided to put the Kaveri engine on the back burner. And over all these years and decades that we have been developing the Kaveri engine, we've spent peanuts on the engine. Peanuts. We don't fund our development of our own technology. We want to buy foreign technology, right? We have spent peanuts, or maybe $1 billion and a half over the development of the Kaveri engine over all these decades. And then we expect it to work. So a lot of the fault lies with the government of India. A lot of it. Maybe some of the blame has to be shared by the armed forces or whatever. I mean, we don't know. The twin engine deck-based fighter has been put on ice right now. I don't think it's going to happen. Tejas Mark II, we'll see what happens with that. It will become operational. It will start flying in sometime in the 2030s, maybe 5-10 years more. And even the Rafale, this extra 114, whenever they come in, they'll come in by 2030 or whatever. So we are going backwards and backwards in terms of the number of aircraft we need to have. Ideally, we should have 1,000+ fighter planes. I mean, an economy as big as India, we are almost at parity with Pakistan. What is the government doing? How can a third-rate nation like Pakistan have almost near parity with India in terms of the numbers of fighter planes? What kind of a joke is this? So the government clearly has a lot to answer. I mean, this government has been in power how many years? 11+ years, almost 12 now. What have they done? So yeah. So that's where we are. But the main answer to your question is that we still haven't finalized the Rafale deal. It's still not finalized. And should we go for a production line of the Sukhoi-57? Well, if the Sukhoi-57 is indeed a good aircraft, then it makes sense to also have a production line of the Sukhoi-57 in India. So one of the conditions we will make for the Rafale is that the Rafale has to be produced in India. And all the components also need to be produced in India. It's not just that we should assemble the aircraft in India. It has all the spare parts, components. Most of them should be produced in India, manufactured in India themselves. So these are some of the negotiating points we need to finalize. The French will try to maximize their interest in whatever they get out of it. But if we are paying so much, we need to, have a much better deal than whatever the Indian media outlets are reporting right now. So it's still a work in progress. These things are interminable. I don't know why defense acquisition in India is such a protracted, lengthy, interminable process. I don't get it why. Bureaucracy, right? And I suppose, allegedly other interests and whatnot. But who suffers? The nation suffers as a consequence. So all this money we are we are spending, and we are paying foreigners. Even 1/10 of that money, if we had spent on the jet engine, indigenous jet engine, we would have had far better results by now. I don't know what the government of India is doing and why we are doing this, but that's where we are, and it's disappointing. Real Vladimir Putin says the US has banned number one Pakistanis and superpower Bangladeshis from entering the US. Is it a way to humiliate its vassals? Rushabh Tare says Trump has recently suspended visas for many countries, which includes Russia, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. Even Nepal, even Thailand, if I'm mistaken. Okay, so we can understand Russia and Iran, but why Pakistan? Why Bangladesh? What's really the reason the US State Department is doing this despite their increasing partnership with Pakistan and Bangladesh? Look, their partnership with Pakistan and Bangladesh is that of a master with its vassals. Okay? That's the relationship. It's the patron, those guys are its clients. And they are essentially attack dogs for the US in the Indian subcontinent. And their job is to be part of the US strategy of containing India. So Pakistan acts as an enabler of nuclear blackmail against India, as a terrorist nation that can strike India from time to time and keep India off balance, and so on. That's the role of Pakistan. And Bangladesh, it's another nuisance that they've created as East Pakistan in the west, in the eastern part of India, off the eastern border of India. So that's the deal. So that is the utility these two countries have for the Americans, and they pay them well for that. So they pay the Pakistani armed forces, their Asim Munir fellow, that guy, and I'm sure they're paying Mohammed Yunus whatever money or whatever. So that they'll take care of their minions. They will take care of their puppets very well. But the Americans don't care about the people of Pakistan or Bangladesh, right? So why should they issue visas to them? What the Americans have done now, what the US government has done now, is they have suspended or stopped visa processing for a large number of countries, maybe more than 70 countries. Let's find out exactly what the number is. How many nations visa processing has been suspended by the US? Okay, 75 countries. Okay. All right. So suspension of immigrant visa processing for 75 countries, and so it's 75 nations, right? And so why have the Americans done this? The Americans, especially the Trump administration, they are concerned about immigration. They, their voter base is concerned about American jobs going to foreigners. They're concerned about all these things. Um, and it's well known that many of these countries, the immigrants who come in from these countries, the immigrants actually are a burden on the American taxpayer. No question about that. So if an immigrant comes in from, let's say, Somalia or Sudan or Afghanistan, Pakistan, whatever, or Bangladesh, they typically are a burden on the US taxpayer. Over 10 years, they leech money out of the system rather than contribute money to the system or contribute value to the system. If you have an Indian immigrant who goes to the US, the Indian immigrant typically outperforms all other immigrants in the value they contribute to the US economy over a period of 10, 20, whatever years. So the US government has decided to suspend visa processing for nations that are dangerous, potential terrorist nations, or nations that whose immigrants are typically, low quality immigrants who actually are a burden on the US economic system and the US taxpayer. That's what the Americans are doing. The Indian immigrant is a net contributor, is the highest net contributor per capita to the US economy. Why will they stop processing Indian visas? The Indian immigrant is the highest value immigrant to the US. So they won't do that for India. What about Pakistan? The Pakistani immigrant is a burden to the US economy. The Bangladeshi immigrant is a burden to the US economy. I don't know. Nepal also is part of the list, apparently. Even Thailand seems to be part of the list. I'm not sure why, but whatever. So there must be different considerations for different countries. Some countries are clearly nations that whose immigrants are burdens on the US system. Those immigrants, those countries, that the visa processing, if it stopped, it just makes sense. Some other countries, maybe there are some political reasons or whatever. We can understand Russia, political reasons, Iran, political reasons. I'm not sure if Iranian immigrants are really, on average, high quality net contributors to the US system or economy, but there could be political reasons as well. So the Pakistani and Bangladeshi immigrants, look at the way the contributions of Pakistani immigrants to the UK. What kind of gangs, grooming gangs and whatnot, that's what the Pakistanis contribute. Who wants such people, right? So that it's not about humiliating the vassals or whatever. It's just that the US wants high quality immigration, and Pakistan is not that. Bangladesh is not that. Somalia is not that, and so on about other countries. That's the reason. Okay, two questions here. Mriganka Shekhar Viswas says, if the US attacks Iran, can Iran stand up to the might of the US military? Also, apart from attacking US bases in West Asia region, does Iran possess the military might to choke Hormuz? Rushabh Tare says, could we talk about Iran? While the people are protesting, there seems to be no leadership inside Iran. Really? Okay. The IRGC, despite being compromised, has conducted brutal crackdowns. Really? Because the Western media is reporting that? Is that so? Is that why you're saying that? The Iranians blocked Starlink with the help of Russia. If the US and Israel go there, Khamenei will make it a patriotic war and the mission fails. Also, Iran is not a rollover. They are pretty capable and may inflict damage and fight a war of attrition, which Trump can't afford. Trump can't afford to get bogged down in Iran. At most, they may bomb Tehran and nuclear facilities. So what is going to be the end game in Iran? Will it be a brutal crackdown, civil war, or any other hidden moves, or are we underrating them? Okay, first of all, there seems to be no leadership inside Iran. I'm not sure what's the basis for that kind of statement or claim. There is clear leadership within Iran. The government is functioning. The nation is being governed, administered, right? There is leadership, clear leadership. The IRGC, despite being compromised, has conducted brutal crackdowns. How do we know they have conducted brutal crackdowns? Because the Western media is reporting that. On what basis is the Western media putting out whatever numbers, 12,000 dead? On what basis? Do they have reporters on the ground who can actually corroborate those numbers? They don't. So from where do these numbers of 12,000 dead come? There are some videos on social media of some protests happening over a period of maybe a week or so in large cities like Tehran and Mashhad, perhaps, etc. That's a couple of cities, maybe 4 or 5 large cities. What about the rest of Persia? What about that? All the hundreds of towns, villages, thousands of villages. What about that? What about the other provinces? What's happening there? Nothing's happening there, as far as we can know or see. So, a few cities there are demonstrations happening over a period of, let's say, 5 to 7 days or whatever the period of time is. That doesn't mean that Iran is under chaos. Now, brutal crackdowns. How do we know the IRGC has been doing all this? We can see some videos on social media of some men firing rifles or weapons at a crowd. The men aren't wearing uniforms. They could be IRGC in plain clothes. They could be maybe agents of some foreign country in plain clothes. How do we know who they are? I mean, we have to. Whatever claims we make, there has to be clear evidence for the claim. We can't just assume it's this or that. So, I have no evidence the IRGC has conducted brutal crackdowns. I have seen some sad, terrible, tragic images of dead people, but it's not 12,000. And I don't know who killed them, whether it's the IRGC or whether it is foreign agents. I don't know who killed them. So, how do you know who killed them? Because the BBC is saying it. Do you trust the BBC? Have you seen BBC's reporting towards India? All lies. Have you seen the CNN's reporting towards India, about India? If you look at the BBC and the CNN and all the Western media outlets, the overwhelming majority of its reporting about India is negative. It's consistently negative. Much of it is just lies. So how can you trust that media? I just don't get it. I don't get why Indians don't think. Okay, and there is the thing about Starlink. Well, it looks like the Iranians are successfully, at least partially successfully, blocking Starlink, perhaps with Russia's aid, possibly. Okay. Now, the question is, if the US attacks Iran, can Iran stand up to the might of the US military? And can they choke, can they blockade the Strait of Hormuz? Can they attack American bases in West Asia, etc.? So let's take a look at the US bases in West Asia, okay? US bases in Middle East. Okay, they call it Middle East, we call it West Asia, whatever. Here we have it. So as you can see, how about this? This is cleaner. US military facilities in the Middle East. Let me open this in a different. Let me reopen that properly. Okay, so here's a bunch of American military facilities in West Asia. You have bases in Oman, you have bases in UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. Iraq obviously is under, well, essentially under US occupation. In Jordan, Syria is also a US asset now. Turkey also. Israel is obviously the US number one supporter, ally. And of course, Pakistan is now, you could say, a US asset. So Iran is kind of encircled from 3 directions, right? That's where we have it. Now, what that means is that if there's a war, if there's a US or US-Israeli joint invasion of Iran, or an attack on Iran, then what you will have is that Iran will be in a position to strike at all these American assets, whether it's Oman, whether it's UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Turkey, wherever. The Iranians can strike at these American assets because the Iranians have very high quality missiles in very large quantities. Quality plus quantity, both, right? The Iranians could hit Israel. They could hit all these American air bases around them. They could hit Pakistan if required. They could even hit Turkey if required with their ballistic and cruise missiles and so on. They also have high quality drones, the Iranians. So they could use the drones and missiles to also blockade the Strait of Hormuz. They also have a decentish navy. But the real strength is the missiles that Iran has. So Iran could be pretty capable at doing this. Yeah, and if the US and Israel attempt an invasion of Iran, that they'll get bogged down potentially. Because look, I don't know how many Iranians actually are opponents of the regime of the Ayatollahs. I don't know. The Iranian diaspora in the West, it is overwhelmingly anti the Iranian regime. They are against the Iranian regime, most of them, but they don't represent the true voices of the people who live in Iran, right? The Iranian diaspora outside Iran. So it's highly possible that maybe even today, maybe 55% of Iranians support the regime, maybe 65% support the regime. And what you see is just in a couple of cities. And if Iran comes under foreign invasion, okay, and US style invasions always cause large numbers of civilian casualties. Look at the way the Americans have done in the things in the past. They essentially flattened Iraq in 2003, flattened entire cities. Obviously, cities have people inside. We don't talk about them, right? When the Americans invade the flattened cities, this causes tremendous numbers of casualties. The Americans say it's okay, it's part of the game. If Iranians are killed in this manner, do you think even the ones who are against the regime, you don't think they'll fight back? Iran's a pretty big country. So Iran can inflict damage. Iran can fight. Of course, pinpoint strikes, it's something the Americans are very capable of. They can take out nuclear facilities, military facilities. I'm sure if the Americans quickly take out the missile facilities, then Iran could be kind of a sitting duck. But the people will fight, potentially. Right? So then, overall, with this understood, what's the end game in Iran? That is the big question. What is America's end game in Iran? What the Americans seek is, first of all, a complete end to Iran's nuclear program. Complete end of the program. And secondly, the Americans seek control of Iran's oil and gas resources. They seek control over that. Two things only. The regime change may not even be that important, as long as the Americans are convinced that Iran's nuclear program is finished. And two, the Americans can control all of Iran's resources of oil and gas. Then the Americans are fine. So if the regime of the Ayatollahs can provide evidence to the US that they have completely ended the nuclear program, and they hand over control of oil and gas to the Americans, then the Americans will be very pleased, and that is the end game, essentially. So whatever the US is doing globally, it's about control of land and oil resources, energy resources. That's what it is. And I don't think it's going to be very easy for the Americans to effect a regime change in Iran. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be chaotic if they try it. So that's the situation. So the end game, once again, to reiterate, the Americans seek to control energy and territory and resources, other natural resources, critical minerals and whatnot. That's what they see. They don't care about the people of Iran or whatever. And if you are under the impression that if there is a regime change in Iran, then Iran will become a Zoroastrian nation, think again. If the Americans actually succeed in effecting a regime change in Iran, they will flood Iran with Christian missionaries. It's the first thing they'll do. Remember that. If Iran falls to the US, Iran is not going to become a Zoroastrian nation, it's going to become a Christian nation. Okay. Rushabh Tare says, India has issued an advisory for our citizens to leave Iran. Also, we see the USS Abraham Lincoln moving from the Pacific to close to Iranian waters. While a war may be unlikely, we can see movement and preparation for any eventuality. How will instability in Iran impact India with respect to Chabahar and the international north-south transport corridor? How does it impact Afghanistan? And what impact does it have on the US, on Armenia and its survival, the survival of Armenia? How will Russia and China's standings be impacted? They blocked Starlink, etc. Okay. 73 different questions. Let's focus on one thing. There's lots of questions embedded in this. Let's focus on one thing. Chabahar. What's the impact on Chabahar? So what's happened with Chabahar? India has liquidated its ownership of Chabahar, given the money to Iran, given it back. So India no longer owns whatever it owned of Chabahar. India has given it back to Iran. India has given the money to Iran. India may perhaps still operate some part of Chabahar, but that's about it. That may also end soon. So what has India done? So the Americans had given a deadline of whatever date, it's about to expire now, for the reimposition of sanctions on Chabahar. And they also have this 25% additional tariffs for anybody who does business with Iran. So what has India done? India has caved into the US. India has caved into the US. India has come under US pressure and buckled, caved in. Is it terrible? No. It's a practical decision. You see? So that's what's happened. So, look, India has been saying for a long time, right? Whatever decisions we make, we don't allow third parties to influence those decisions. That's not the case anymore. The US has told us how we should behave with respect to Iran, and we have accepted whatever the Americans have said. So now we can see what hard power is and what soft power is. India's power is mainly soft power. India's hard power is this. US hard power is that. So the Americans told India, ultimatum, stop doing business with Iran. We're gonna sanction Chabahar. If you still keep doing business with Iran, we're gonna impose 25% more tariffs on you. So India said, okay, we are out of Iran. That's it. Is it a failure by the government of India? No. It is a reasonable, practical, pragmatic step. Right? There's no comparison between India and in the US. Whatever the Americans say, we have to do it. Does this mean that we are on the road towards becoming a vassal? Not exactly. It doesn't exactly mean that, but this could be the beginning of such a road of India becoming an American vassal. This could be the beginning if we are not very careful. Right? So that's where we are right now. India has caved in to the American pressure vis-a-vis Chabahar. So Chabahar, it's over now, essentially. If we can still operate it, it will only be, see, the Iranians also understand this, that India had no choice. And the Iranians also have taken actions in the past that have been not very good for India. For example, their supreme leader keeps on talking about Kashmir from time to time, kind of supporting Pakistan. So it's not like we owe something, a debt of gratitude or something to Iran. We were working on mutually beneficial terms, and now the Americans have stepped in and pushed India out, elbowed India out, and India is out. India is a lightweight compared to the US. Please understand that. Okay, we live in the real world. I am not one of those people who will say, "Oh, we are superpower, we are Vishwaguru." We are not. Past 4 years, I've been saying we are nothing like that, and now you can see the actual evidence that whatever I have been saying is absolutely correct. India has to be very careful now. The past 10 years, India has been doing the opposite of hide your strength and bide your time. Deng Xiaoping said when he was alive about China that China needs to hide its strength and bide its time. Keep quiet and keep doing your work quietly. The past 10 years, India has been doing the opposite of that. So now you see what happens as a consequence. India has been shouting superpower and Vishwaguru for the past 10 years without actually putting in the sufficient work to make that happen. Where are the reforms? Where is everything? So yeah, that's where we are right now. Briganka Sekhar Biswas says, is there a possibility for direct military confrontation between US and NATO troops in Greenland? France is sending troops there. France is sending 15 soldiers to Greenland. The UK is sending 2 soldiers. Denmark is sending 78 dogs to Greenland. And is Russia sending is Russia sending something? Look, there is no possibility for a direct military confrontation between the US and NATO troops in Greenland. Zero. Because NATO is mostly US. The US owns NATO. The US controls NATO. How can you go to war with an organization you control? It won't happen. The US, the European politicians, they are all in America's pockets. They're all in America's pockets. They won't dare go against their master and financier. Nothing like this will happen. They'll make some noises and some sound, blah blah. We oppose this, etc. We are strongly opposed to this. Maybe Monsieur Macron of France will make stronger statements. Maybe he may send, instead of 28 soldiers, 300 soldiers. So, alors, what difference does it make? Even France can't actually seriously think of fighting the US. So this is, nothing's going to come out of this. The Americans are going to acquire Greenland. They're going to make a payment. The Americans are going to make a payment to Denmark and then formally take over Greenland. That's what's going to happen. This is my prediction. I don't make predictions, but here is one. The Americans are going to make a payment to Denmark and then annex Greenland. That's what the Americans will do very soon. Very soon, how soon? Maybe 1 week, maybe 3 months. Definitely in this year, 2026. Okay? So there's no possibility of a direct military confrontation between the US and NATO. No. Okay. Rushabh Tare says, what's happening in Venezuela? Nicolas Maduro is in US custody. Moreover, Madame no, that other lady, Machado, the Nobel Prize winning vampire, that lady, she met Trump and gave her Nobel Prize to Trump and then tried to satisfy Trump's ego. Well, she gave her Nobel Prize to Trump as tribute to Trump and to placate his ego, right? Moreover, however, Delcy Rodriguez and the military seem ready to cooperate, and the US has no issues. Will the US be really able to extract oil from Venezuela and profit from it? And have they started moving in this direction? And how do you see this new game of not changing the entire regime, but aligning the regime in a way that supports your interests? How is this game? Okay, what's happening? So they'll see. So this lady, Machado, the Nobel Prize winner, she went to the White House and she presented her Nobel Prize medal to Trump, and she bowed down to him, and maybe she kissed his feet or something. Whatever she did, she seeks to rule Venezuela. Okay, she has been saying this for a very long time. The moment I become, the moment I come to power, I will hand over the whole of Venezuela, all its industries, everything to the US. We will make it very easy for American companies to operate in Venezuela. You come and take our resources, extract everything, plunder, pillage, kill, whatever you want. It's all yours. That's what she's been saying. This lady is a vampire. She's a blood-sucking ghoul. That's what this Machado lady is. I mean, the Nobel Prize has zero legitimacy now. Zero credibility after someone like her getting it. And the Nobel Committee has made it very clear that the Nobel Prize cannot be transferred to someone. And it can't be revoked. And yet she has attempted to transfer it to Trump. And Trump is pleased. Yes, he's pleased, isn't he? So that's the deal with this lady, Machado. But Delcy Rodriguez, who was the vice president of Venezuela under the presidency of Nicolas Maduro, he now is the ruler of, she governs Venezuela now. And the military is aligned with her. Right? And she has indicated that she is willing to cooperate with the United States. Now, what does the US seek in Venezuela? The US seeks complete control over Venezuela's natural resources, energy resources. Venezuela has plenty of gold, but more than that, it has plenty of oil. 20%, roughly 20% of the world's proven oil reserves. This oil is extra heavy oil. It's sour crude oil. It's not sweet, light crude. Very difficult to process. What do you do with sour, extra heavy crude? You may turn it into diesel, or you may turn it into asphalt. And only 3 or 4 refineries across the world have the capability to process this kind of crude oil. One of these is in India, Western India, Gujarat. So the US wants to control all of this oil. It's about controlling the energy that flows out of Venezuela. And Delcy Rodriguez, she's a practical person, obviously. She saw what was done to Mr. Maduro. So she says, okay, since we can't do a thing about you being 1,000 times more powerful than us, we will cooperate with you. And the US is fine with that. And yet Trump has not been able to thus far persuade American oil companies to invest in Venezuela and start operations there, because the American companies are wondering and they're worried that maybe in the future Venezuela may once again nationalize the oil industry. So thus far, American companies have been reluctant to move into Venezuela. But you have Venezuelan refineries and whatnot, or at least extractors, not refineries. Not, I don't think Venezuela has refineries, but Venezuela has the ability to extract oil from the ground, and the US wants to control that. So as long as Delcy Rodriguez and the military cooperate with the US is fine with that. The US doesn't want to do the hard work of installing a new regime. Why do that when the existing regime is cooperating? Why do the hard work of installing an absolutely brand new regime and setting up a whole system of governance and law and order and judiciary and whatnot? Why do that? Who cares what happens to Venezuela as long as you get the oil? So the US has no issues as long as Delcy Rodriguez and the government of Venezuela cooperate, and they are cooperating, right? This is a win-win situation for the US, actually. They don't have to do any hard work in Venezuela. They don't have to install a new government and all that. The existing regime cooperates. That is the best outcome the US could have hoped for. What's the alternative? The US has to go in, fight the military, depose the regime, effect an actual physical regime change, fight the insurgency that may erupt as a consequence, placate the people, suppress the people. A lot of effort, energy, money, expenditure, all kinds of things. And then you barely control the country, and then you can extract stuff out of it. That's a lot. It's a mess. Why do that? Just force the existing regime to cooperate. That's it. You get everything you want. So that is what's happening, and the US is gonna control all the energy resources of Venezuela. Right? It's part of their overall game plan of controlling as much of the energy supply of the world as possible, in order to isolate nations like China and Russia. Russia won't work, but China for sure. And to put immense pressure on nations like India. Okay, that's the game. Sam says, among the world's top powers, most have either dominant manufacturing or dominant military tech ecosystems. Is India trying to rise with an asymmetric foundation? And if so, where does that make us vulnerable? So India, so you see, to be a major power, to be a serious contender geopolitically, any nation that's a serious contender or a serious player has a powerful technological base and a powerful manufacturing base. So if you have a high quality, high tech technological ecosystem in your country, then you can develop and design the technologies you need to be relevant geopolitically, from a military perspective, from an economic perspective. And it's not enough to have a high quality technological ecosystem. You need to have a major manufacturing base that can turn the technological innovations into products that can be manufactured at scale. So you need a research and development ecosystem, which is the tech ecosystem, which could be either in your universities or in your corporations or in both. And then all the output of that needs to go into your manufacturing base, which will then mass produce the products, that the advanced products that come out of that incorporate the technologies you're developing. And that's how you become a genuinely relevant player economically and militarily and geopolitically. So China is a great example of that. The US used to be a great example of that. The US has the world's best education system that's focused on science and technology and research and development. And all of those high quality students that are output by the education system are absorbed by the industries. The industries and corporations have their own R&D setups everywhere. And they use these R&D setups with this bright young minds coming from the education system to produce the world's best products, right? Or to design the best products, which are then either manufactured in the US or in China. The Chinese have copied the US setup. They now have a world-class university system, world-class education system focused on science, technology, research, and development. And the Chinese they also have these major corporations, and they're the world's largest manufacturing base, industrial base, right? Two great examples. Where does India stand in this? India has a rotten education system, third grade education system that destroys India's best minds. India doesn't have any real R&D happening anywhere in any university or any IIT or whatever. Nothing of any global value. Not even 1% of global value comes from here. Then India doesn't have corporations that do R&D. Recently, Reliance, which is a huge corporation, was seeking to buy some technology from a Chinese corporation, which was like a 1/100th of the strength of Reliance. The Chinese refused, and Reliance now can't do what it wanted to do because Reliance has never bothered to invest in its own R&D. Reliance doesn't do R&D. Reliance manufactures. So it wanted Chinese technology. The Chinese little company said no. Reliance can't do a thing about it. This is the mindset in India. So India's education system is third grade. It's rotten. India's corporations don't do R&D. They want to do screwdriver stuff, and we don't manufacture anything that's globally relevant. Textiles. I'm talking about high-tech stuff. So without a world-class education system that supplies a world-class R&D ecosystem, that supplies a world-class industrial manufacturing base, you are not a serious geopolitical player. You're not. India is regarded as a major geopolitical player because of its large economy, the fourth largest economy in the world, big market and all. India has a decent military. India has a world-class missile program and so on. But India has major deficiencies which need deep reforms and massive reforms, and none of those reforms are happening. So I'm not sure what India's future is. It makes us super vulnerable everywhere. India is not taken seriously, actually, by the Chinese or the Americans. The Chinese don't see India as a contender for the top crown. The Americans don't see India as a contender for the top crown. They don't take India seriously. The Chinese don't do. India is like Africa. It's like Nigeria or something. Slightly better version. Yeah. That is the truth. I'm sure you want to hear something else, but I can tell you lies. That's the truth. Avish Reddy says, Namaste, your live streams are like therapy to me. I keep hearing them in loop since 2021. Thank you very much, sir. Avishji, thank you. The questions are, 1, is China more vulnerable due to internal structural pressures like demographics, debt, legitimacy, than to external military pressure? And does the West misread this balance? So what is China more vulnerable to? Internal pressures like demographic decline, dropping TFR, etc. Maybe debt. I don't know what the debt structure in China is. The Western media reports all kinds of weird stuff about China, that China is deeply in debt to itself or whatever, but I don't know about that. Legitimacy, the Chinese Communist Party is fully legitimate. No Chinese citizen doubts or questions the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party to rule. The Chinese Communist Party does have the mandate of heaven right now. So these are the factors that are internal in nature. Is China vulnerable to these pressures? The demographics will kick in as a problem in the next 20 years, not right now. So right now, it's not an issue. Debt, I think the Chinese have the economy under control, debt, whatever. Legitimacy, there's no question about the legitimacy of the CCP. So there is no such issue. So the internal structural pressures aren't really genuine pressures. External pressure, like the military pressure. Well, what really constrains China is that it is extremely risk averse. The Chinese Communist Party is very happy to bully weaker nations. The Chinese are extremely reluctant to go to war with a more powerful nation, especially the US. The Chinese don't want a war with the US. The US is willing to ride roughshod everywhere. It'll go and regime change Venezuela. They may do a regime, or at least attempt a regime change in Iran. They have done regime changes all over the place, recently in the subcontinent, East and West Pakistan. The Americans do all this. They will fire weapons. They'll fire shots. The Americans aren't afraid of a military fight. The Chinese are frightened of a military fight. The Chinese know that if they go to war with the US, whether they win or lose, they will lose half of their economy at least. Whatever they've worked for all these years, they will lose. And it's very hard to hit the US. So that's the major Chinese vulnerability. The Chinese want to fight the US, but economically, never militarily. And that is a huge drawback of China. And Trump knows that. And he is pressuring China on that front. Right? So China did not want Venezuela to fall. Venezuela fell. China did not want Syria to fall. Syria fell. Now, who knows what will happen in Iran? China wants to take Taiwan, but is frightened to take military action. It's very clear what China is afraid of now. It's becoming more and more clear. China doesn't want military action. China wants economic warfare, but never military warfare. The Americans know it. So they're going to push. So that is what China is vulnerable to. External military pressure, not the internal structural pressures. Second question. Is strategic autonomy a coherent long-term grand strategy for middle powers in periods of intense great power competition? Or does historical evidence suggest that such strategies collapse under systemic crisis, forcing alignment despite prior hedging? Okay. So historically, what do we have? Let's say you are not a very major power, okay, middle power or whatever you want to call it. You have maybe two great powers or superpowers. And those two are competing for, control of the world order. And you are a smaller nation or a weaker nation, maybe large geographically, but you're weak. You're weak. So what do you do? So ideally, as a weaker nation, what you do is you play a balancing game. You do the balancing act, the tightrope walking act, right? You play one side against another. You try to be friendly with both. Or you try to be in such a position that both want you to do something for them, or both want you on their side. So that's the balancing game. That's what you call hedging, right? Strategic autonomy. Now, that's the game India is playing vis-a-vis the US and China. China is more powerful than India, no question. About 4 times more powerful than India. The US is about 20 times more powerful than India. So that's the game we are playing. We became part of the Quad. So if you're part of the Quad, maybe the US will assist us if there's a war with China. All that stuff. We bought American weapons. We are also buying Russian weapons and so on. We allowed American tech products to infiltrate and penetrate India all over the place. Today, India can't run without American tech products, right? Everything Indians do take for granted, whether it is Google, whether it is Gmail, whether it is Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, this, that, WhatsApp, Apple phones, Android phones, laptops, everything is American. What does India make? Nothing. Why? Ask yourselves. What is the government of India doing? What have they done? Why does India make nothing? But India makes nothing. So India became more and more tightly bound to the US, consciously, voluntarily. We buy American F414 jet engines, which are never delivered. Did the government not foresee that? I suppose they did not. So that's the game of hedging. We buy weapons from Russia. We do trade with China. We buy something from France, but we do a lot of our business with the US. So that's the kind of balancing game India has been playing. But when push comes to shove, when the US says get out of Chabahar, or else India has to get out of Chabahar. Tomorrow the US will say something else. What will India do? Tomorrow the US says agree to the trade deal on our terms, or we impose 500% tariffs. Your choice. What does India do then? So when a nation is way more powerful than you, this hedging and this balancing doesn't work long term. It works short term. It worked as long as the US did not feel that we need to rearrange the entire global world order and break down the rules-based world order. So until the Biden regime, the US was okay, let the so-called rules-based world order be in place. So India benefited from that. But now the US is changing everything, and now India is under tremendous pressure. The pressure is going to be for India to become a US vassal. In the next 5 years will tell us whether this happens or not. There's a higher likelihood of India becoming a vassal than not. to be very realistic. Yeah. So historical evidence suggests that such strategies collapse under systemic crisis like the one we are facing. The systemic crisis, right, that we are seeing right now is a crisis that the US has manufactured for its own benefit. What is the crisis? The systemic crisis. The entire world, so-called rules-based world order, the system that the Americans had constructed, they are tearing it down right now, and they are creating a completely different system. That's a systemic crisis. Okay, and there is an emerging bipolarity of sorts. Wow, one wonders how long this bipolarity will last. The Chinese side and the US side, the bifurcation of the global world order. China, Russia, Iran, Syria, North Korea, Venezuela. Well, Syria is gone, Venezuela is gone. So it's like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. Only 4 nations left now. Pakistan is no longer on the Chinese side. Pakistan is a obedient US lapdog now. What if Iran goes? So you see, the entire system is being changed. This is a systemic crisis. Complete realignment, reordering of the global world order. And the US knows what it wants from India in this new world order they seek to create. They want India to be an obedient vassal. What's going to happen is the question. It is, if you say we have two choices by by 2028, okay, vassal, sovereign, two choices. To be sovereign, we'll have to pay a lot of prices. We'll have to pay a lot. It's going to cost a lot to remain sovereign. Easy answer, easy choice, become a vassal. I think the likelihood of India becoming a vassal is higher right now, until 2028. If India remains sovereign until 2030, somehow, then it will be hard to stop India after that. But if you are a smart betting person, your money will be on India becoming a vassal. So that is where we are, India. That is exactly where we are. And you can see what happened in Chabahar. India has moved out of Chabahar, essentially. We've liquidated our stake in Chabahar. Right? Maybe that's the first step towards vassalhood. Perhaps. Hopefully not. But maybe. Right? Let's wait and watch. Rushabh Tare says, on one side, China aggressively claims the Shaksgam Valley. Indian Army issued statements on the border situation and said that while our forces hold our entire territory, we are in a better position, which reflects that our army has not reduced any vigilance in the border. I don't know what that entire word salad means, but whatever. But the CCP delegation has visited the BJP and RSS offices, and also the offices of other political parties, not just the BJP and the RSS, which is not a political party, but the Chinese Communist Party delegation also visited the headquarters of other political parties, apart from the BJP. Indian exports to China are at a record high. Is it really a détente or a frenemy game? Talk, but only limited action. What's really going on, and how should India stay alert? Okay, answer the last question first. What should India do? Stay completely alert vis-a-vis China. Completely alert from a military perspective. Keep an eye on what the Chinese are doing north of the India-Tibet border, north of the Pangong Lake, north of the India-Tibet border overall, in the Arunachal sector, in the Ladakh sector, in other sectors. What are the Chinese doing? They're bulking up their military presence. So they'll come to India, talk nice things. At the same time, they're bulking up their military presence. So let's not be fooled. India has to be semper vigilans, forever vigilant vis-a-vis China. Okay? That's number one. Secondly, it's interesting the Chinese Communist Party delegation came to India and visited the headquarters of various political parties, etc. The BJP headquarters, the RSS, which is not a political party, but the parent organization of the BJP, the CCP delegation visited the RSS headquarters. And they also visited the headquarters of several other Indian political parties. Okay, so it's not just BJP, RSS. Why? Why this? Maybe it's a routine visit. Maybe the CCP is trying to send a message to India and the world that we seek peace and all that. We seek friendly relations with India. Maybe that sort of thing. Or maybe they are genuinely exploring the possibility of maybe some kind of closer cooperation with a weaker nation like India. Because India is a weaker nation compared to China. Okay, let's not forget that. So, so it's like India sending a delegation to Nepal or something. Okay? Kind of like that. Maybe not Nepal. Maybe India sending a delegation to Indonesia. Okay? Indonesia is about, well, it's obviously a major country and a country that is a very friendly nation for sure. But hard power wise, Indonesia is about 1/4 of India, like India is 1/4 of China, right? Roughly. So it's like India sending a delegation to Indonesia. So what's going on? Does this indicate some kind of détente or a frenemy game? I think it's definitely not a détente. It's too early for it to be détente. China will have to come under more pressure from the US for it to seriously consider any kind of friendly détente-like relationship with India. Right now, it's just talk. China, you cannot have a détente with China unless the Chinese agree to resolve the India-Tibet border issue. There's no question of a détente without that core issue being resolved. Always remember this. When it comes to the India-China relationship, the core issue, the central issue, which has been created by China, is China's illegal annexation and occupation of Tibet and the Chinese insistence for decades of not demarcating the India-Tibet border so that India can be kept under pressure. This entire problem is of China's making, not our making. So the onus is on China to solve this. Okay, that's the deal. So all these visits of delegations and blah, 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 talk, I don't care about it. But maybe it indicates potentially, possibly, some kind of future, improvement potentially in relations. But the only improvement that makes sense is the demarcation of the border. And there's no step on that. There's no move on that at all. So, yeah, it's all words, no actions right now. That's what it is. Rushabh Tare says, what are Jus Soli and Jus Sanguinis respectively? What are the origins of these terms and their meaning in American context? Which pattern does the US follow compared to other major populations, India, China, Russia, Indonesia, EU, Brazil, African, etc., 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 etc.? What's the difference between the two, Jus Soli and Jus Sanguinis? And why did the US choose to give birthright citizenship to its citizens unlike other countries where bloodline matters? Okay, see, Jus Soli and Jus Sanguinis are two systems of giving citizenship to a person. Jus Soli means birthright. These are Latin terms. Okay, Jus Soli means birthright citizenship. If you are born on the territory of a specific country and they recognize Jus Soli, then you are automatically a citizen just by being born on the territory, on the soil of the country. That's Jus Soli. Jus Sanguinis means it doesn't matter where you're born. If you are a bloodline descendant of a citizen of so-and-so country, you have the right to be a citizen of that country. So the US, so that's bloodline citizenship. So for India, if you are born on Indian territory, you don't automatically get Indian citizenship. You have to prove that either one or both of your parents is Indian by blood. So if you are an illegal Bangladeshi infiltrator who has been living in India for 40 years and you have children and grandchildren, then you are not a citizen of India. Your children are not citizens of India, and your grandchildren are also not citizens of India. They are illegal occupants of Indian territory. That is what Jus Sanguinis means. So just by being born on this soil, you don't become a citizen of this country. That is Jus Sanguinis. It rejects birthright citizenship. Okay, so the US offers offers birthright citizenship, which means that it recognizes Jus Soli. If you're born there, you become a citizen. Why does the US does? What about India? India doesn't recognize Jus Soli. India says only Jus Sanguinis. China also Jus Sanguinis, bloodline citizenship, not birthright citizenship. Russia, I'm not sure. You can look up the other countries what they have. Okay. Brazil most likely has Jus Soli, which means if you're born in Brazil, you're a natural born Brazilian citizen. African countries, maybe it's a mixture of whatever. EU, it depends, and so on. So China, Jus Sanguinis, India, Jus Sanguinis, US, Jus Soli, Brazil, Jus Soli, and US also recognizes Jus Sanguinis. So let's say your mother and father are both American citizens, but you were born, let's say, in India. So you were not born on US territory. Then, despite you not being born on US soil, if both your parents or even one of the parents was an American citizen, you get American citizenship. So the US recognizes both Jus Soli and Jus Sanguinis, right? And it depends from country to country. Now, why did the US choose to give birthright citizenship to its citizens, unlike many other countries? It's because the US is an artificial nation. The US is a nation founded on somebody else's territory. It was founded by European occupiers, colonizers, on territory taken from other people who were then erased out of existence. So it's a country founded on people coming from elsewhere and being born, and their children being born here in the US, right? So let's say it's the 1700s. A man comes from England and he meets another woman who has come from England, and they have a child on North American soil. So the child obviously will be recognized as an American citizen. So because of these special circumstances in which the US was created, stolen land belonging to somebody else, those people were genocided, and the people who stole the land now created a new country out of it. So because of those special circumstances of the US being a nation of, let's say, immigrants, that's why the US recognizes Jus Soli as well as Jus Sanguinis now. Okay, that's the deal. Nayan Jyoti Bora says, how do you see the upcoming Artemis 2 mission? Do you think ISRO can catch up to NASA when it comes to crewed space missions anytime soon? Okay. Artemis 2. So the US seeks to send humans back to the moon. The last human mission to the moon, which was an American mission, was like 40, 50 years ago. When was the last? Let's Google this. Okay, I don't remember. Late 70s, probably. Last human. Okay, when was the last crewed moon landing? Let's see. Okay, it's early 70s. Gene Cernan, Harrison Schmitt. The last manned mission to the moon was Apollo 17, December 1972. 82, 92, 2002, 2012, 2012. It's been 54 years. 53 years. That's a long time. Over half a century that humans haven't set foot on the moon. So the Americans seek to change this now. So you had the Artemis 1 mission, which was launched in 2022, if I am not mistaken. And this was an uncrewed mission, unmanned mission that was launched on the SLS system, Space Launch System, NASA SLS. That's the rocket. And it was in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And it did this figure 8 orbit of the moon. So it goes from the Earth, it loops around the Earth, then goes to the moon, shoots around the moon, and then comes back to Earth. That sort of thing. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, Artemis 1 mission. Let's see. So this was, when was it? 2022. That's right. I was absolutely correct. And this is the kind of flight path it took. Okay, it made multiple orbits of the moon, which is fine. Now, what will Artemis 2 do? I think it'll do something very similar, but with human beings this time. Only one loop around the moon. Gonna have 4 human beings, very diverse crew as always in America. 1 lady, 1 black person, 1 American male, and 1 Canadian male. Very diverse crew. So this is the kind of thing it's going to do. So it's not a moon landing mission. It's a flyby mission of the moon. So the Artemis 1 had dummy crew, okay, and it did the thing perfectly, successfully. Now we're gonna send humans. We're gonna do. It's gonna be like Apollo 8. Apollo 8 did a similar thing before Apollo 10 actually landed on the moon, right? So Artemis 2 is gonna do this loop around the moon and return to the Earth. Before it goes to the moon, it's gonna do a couple of orbits of the Earth and do a docking maneuver or something to test docking mechanisms and so on, and then it's gonna go to the moon. Translunar injection and so on and so forth. And Artemis 2 uses, like I said, the SLS rocket, which is the most powerful rocket that can carry human beings thus far. Of course, SpaceX has Starship, which is probably more powerful than SLS, but Starship isn't human rated thus far. SLS is. So that is the Artemis 2 mission. And Artemis 3 perhaps will send humans on the surface of the moon, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what Artemis 3 will do? We can look it up. Artemis 3. Artemis 3. Artemis 3 is going to be the first crewed moon landing mission. And do we know when it happens? Okay, I'm not sure when it happens. Okay, whatever. That's in the future. So Artemis 3 is going to be an actual moon landing, crewed human manned moon landing. Artemis 2 is a loop around the moon and come back. So what do I think of it? Fantastic. The Americans have ambition. They don't want to be left behind in the space race. They want to take the lead, let others catch up. That's the American ethos, and that's admirable, I would say. Can ISRO catch up? Not anytime soon. ISRO doesn't decide what happens, right? The government of India decides what ISRO does, and the government of India has zero ambition right now. Zero ambition. We have some plans of Indian humans on the moon by 2040 or something, or whatever. It's all far in the future. We don't have the rockets that can take us there, that can take humans there. So ISRO is not even in the race right now. Yeah. No ambition. Not ISRO, government of India. No ambition. Nothing. So yeah, that's the simple answer. Okay, we discuss history now. Amisha says, after the Second World War, why were Korea and Germany partitioned between their occupiers? Okay, occupiers. While Japan was solely occupied by just one power, the United States. So after the Second World War ended, it ended in Germany with the capture of Berlin and the disappearance of Adolf Hitler. And then the Asian part of the Second World War ended in August 1945 with the twin American nuclear tests on the people of Japan. So that was the end of the Second World War. And when the Second World War ended, you see, Germany, what is the situation in Germany when the Second World War ended with the fall of Berlin? The Soviets took Berlin. The USSR took the majority of Germany from the east. And the allies, the Western allies, they took whatever was left from the west. So Germany was already effectively partitioned when the war ended. The eastern side, all USSR occupied. The western side occupied by the Americans, the French, and the Americans, the British, and the French. And that's why Germany had to be partitioned, because the moment the war ends, the East and the West are automatically suspicious of each other. The Americans are automatically, instinctively suspicious of the Soviets. They have become very powerful. Now we fear them. Then the Soviets realize the Americans are treating us as enemies. So let's do it then. Let's have it. And that was the deal. So that's why the moment the Second World War ended, Germany was already occupied by two different forces. And that's why it was partitioned essentially along those lines. Even Berlin itself was partitioned. Now, Korea, when the Second World War ended, you had a situation where the northern part of Korea, you had Soviet troops there. Okay? And in the southern part of Korea, you had American or Western troops there. So once again, the moment the war ends, the peninsula is kind of partitioned. And that is what eventually led to the Korean War and the creation of North and South Korea. And that has never actually ended officially, right? There's never been an actual official ceasefire. It's a different story. So that's the deal with Germany as well as Korea. That's why these two were partitioned. The actual partition for Korea happened in the 1950s with the end of the Korean War. Now, what about Japan? So when Japan was on the brink of losing the Second World War, let's go to the map. Okay. Oh, we haven't opened the map today. Well, that is serious. We should rectify that immediately. So here we are. So we're going to talk about Japan. So let's go back to 1945. And at that time, see, Imperial Japan, it had massive territories. The large island in the north of Japan is Sapporo. It's Hokkaido Island, right? Hokkaido. And north of it, you have the Kuril Islands. The Kuril Islands belong to Japan. I've made a couple of videos about this in detail. Even parts of the Kamchatka Peninsula, where they belong to Japan, and Sakhalin probably also belong to Japan. Now, Japan is doing poorly in the Second World War. So the Soviets, what they do, they take over Kamchatka, they take over Sakhalin, and they take over the Kuril Islands as well. Okay, and then the atomic bomb tests happen over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan surrenders. And then the Americans take over, but the Americans can't take over the territories the Soviets have occupied. So you see this, Kunashir is Russian territory. You see, how far is it from Hokkaido? If we look at the distance, it's like 24, 25 kilometers. So you can't see it from the shores, but it's right offshore. What about this island? This is a Russian-held island. Look at that. What about this little island here? That's a Japanese island. Okay. What about this one here? I think that's also Russian territory. So the Russians took all these islands. They took the advantage of Japan's misfortune, and they took all these islands as any reasonably rational nation will do. So even Japan, actually, its territory was partitioned, right? Whatever the Americans were able to occupy, they took it, and they still hold it, and the rest was held by the Russians. And Japan and Russia have this territorial dispute about the Kuril Islands, and the Russians aren't giving anything to Japan. Okay, so that's what happened. Even Japan actually was partitioned, even though you may not realize it. Okay, Nirvana Shanks has a couple of questions. Let's take the second one, the one about Japan. Many Indians visiting Japan, especially when standing in temples, notice that although the language is not understood, the chants, the mantras, the ritual recitations sound strangely familiar, almost reminiscent of mantras heard in Indian temples. What explains this perceived similarity in sound and ritual atmosphere? And what does it reveal about historical or cultural connections across Asia? That's the question. So you see, if you watch YouTube videos of Japanese temple ceremonies and rituals, often you will find that the Japanese priests are reciting mantras that you don't really understand, but they sound very much like Sanskrit mantras and sutras and whatnot. And the fire ceremonies look very much like Indian yagnas. Why is that the case? I mean, you'll see many of these YouTube videos all over the place, Goma fire rituals and whatnot. Oopsie daisy. So you have all these. One second. Okay, let's find this video and put it on the screen. For example, here's an example of a YouTube video such as that. So this is Shingon Buddhist Goma fire ritual, Mount Koya, Japan. I will not play the video because there may be copyright issues or whatever, but you can pause the video, look up the title of the video, and if you're interested, go and take a look at the video. And you will see many such examples on YouTube. So this is a Goma fire ritual. They say it is Buddhist, but the ritual is clearly not what you would consider Buddhist. It's more of a Vedic ritual. It's more of a yagna. And sometimes you have Japanese channels that show this live. The recitation of mantras and sutras and the performance of these yagna-like rituals, fire, involving fire, offering of various things to the fire and so on. So why do we have this incredible similarity? What is the root of this, right? You see, the fact is that India has influenced Japan for about roughly 2000 years. Our Emperor Kanishka sent hundreds of religious missions to the east, mainly to China, as part of trade delegations. And this brought Indian culture into China. And the Chinese then transmitted that into Japan. Buddhist rituals, Vedic rituals, and so much more. One of these things is called Dhyan, which the Japanese call Zen, right? Zen Buddhism, they call it. But it's not a Buddhist thing, it's an Indian thing. So a lot of the Japanese temple rituals, Shinto rituals, even Buddhist rituals, they grew out of Sanskrit chanting. Okay, It traveled from India across China into Japan. It brought Indian mantras, Indian sounds, Indian ritual forms into the practices in Japan. So we have shared roots. Okay. And today you will find that the words that are uttered may have their origin in Sanskrit, but they may be Japanese today. But the rhythm is the same as what you have chanted in temples today. Even the phonetics, the ucharan, the pronunciations are similar to Sanskrit pronunciation. So many of these mantras were originally composed in Sanskrit, and they were simply transliterated into first Chinese and then Japanese language. Okay, they were not translated; they were transliterated. So the phonetic skeleton, the sound skeleton, the pronunciation, it still survives in the original forms in these chants in the temples. And many of these, like I showed you, this Shingon uh, Goma fire ritual. You see, there is it's a Shingon school of Japanese Buddhism, Shinto, whatever, probably Buddhism, right? They still write their mantras in the Siddham script. What is the Siddham script like? Let's take a look. Siddham script Japan. Let's Google that. Okay, see Siddham script. So it's still used in Japanese temples. The Siddham script. Take a look at this. So you can see it has similarities with our Devanagari script, and it is used in Japanese temples, inscriptions, etc. Even today. This is the Siddham script. It's also used in Korea, apparently. As you can see, this is a very interesting, creative use of the Siddham script. So that's the script that's used in many of these temples, many of these rituals. Okay, and the Japanese katakana, the Japanese alphabet, it's a syllabary. Okay, it's called It's called kana, katakana, whatever it is. These also originally represented the syllables in Sanskrit. In Sanskrit, in the Siddham script, or scripts that encoded or embodied Sanskrit. So that's why the sound system once again aligns with Sanskrit style patterns. So because of these matches and these reasons, Japanese priests could and still can chant Sanskrit sutras and mantras very fluidly using their script, the katakana script, and the sound quality is very true to the original. So sometimes it is Sanskrit, sometimes it is Japanese, but it sounds very much like the mantras that are heard in Indian temples. So there's a very clear connection between India and Japan, Indian culture and Japanese culture, Indian traditions and rituals and Japanese traditions and rituals. Essentially, Japanese culture is built, it is founded on a bedrock. The foundation is of Indian culture. The bedrock is of Indian culture. And on top of that, Japanese traditions have been built up, and to such an extent that today you can barely see the Indian elements underneath. But one of the ways to see that is, go to these temples, Shinto temples, Buddhist temples, especially Buddhist temples, where you will treat the temple as a Buddhist temple, but many of the traditions and prayers are not exactly Buddhist traditions and prayers. They are what you would call Hindu traditions and prayers. Many of the gods and goddesses that are worshipped in Japan, for example, Benzaiten, are Hindu gods and goddesses. Benzaiten, who is Benzaiten? It's a Japanese goddess, a kami. What is the original form of Benzaiten? It is Saraswati. Benzaiten, there we have it. Benzaiten is the Japanese version of Saraswati, very clearly. Okay, then you have Kangiten. Who is Kangiten? Kangiten is Vinayaka. All right, Kangiten is Lord Ganesh. And so you have all the Indian gods and goddesses that are present in Japan, and these are not Buddhist gods and goddesses; these are Hindu gods and goddesses that are regarded as Japanese gods and goddesses, or maybe Buddhist gods and goddesses, kami. So there's this deep connection that India has with Japan. The people of Japan may not be completely aware of that today. And when Indians visit Japan, you will find these striking parallels, and you'll be like, "What am I hearing? What am I seeing here? Why is it so? Why does it sound so similar, so familiar?" And this is the reason why. Okay, Swapnil Mishra says, if Africa had been organized into five large regional states, North, East, West, Central, and Southern Africa, rather than fragmented into many smaller nations, how might their economic development and global competitiveness have differed? The question is interesting. If Africa had been divided up carved up into these zones, into all these small nations, would they have these African regions have done better? Would they have been governed better? Would they have been economically better off, more prosperous? Would the living standards be better? Would they be globally more competitive than the current shape and form of African nations today? What would have been the outcome of this sort of thing? Well, we can do the thought experiment today. Where's the map? Here is map. Yes, we bring map. So today, if we look at the map of Africa, you'll see that it has all these nations. Many of the nations are artificially created nations with straight lines, clearly drawn by Europeans on a map, right? Most of these nations have straight line borders, or borders that have significant straight line elements. I mean, I can't think of a single African nation that doesn't have significant straight line elements, right? So all of these borders were drawn by Europeans. Lesotho is more organic. Madagascar doesn't count because it is an island. But here we have it. So let's say we draw straight lines such that we have a northern part of Africa, southern part of Africa, east, west, and central. Would that have provided better outcomes for Africa? You see, there's multiple factors that go into whether there's going to be a better outcome in this case or not. First is, what sort of ethnic composition do you have in one of these zones? See, in the real world, there is competition, there's adversariality, and so much more. So let's say you have multiple ethnic groups who have been living in various parts of Africa for a long time. They will have their own histories. Some of the ethnic groups will not be compatible. Maybe they have centuries-long enmities. You put them together in one country, you're going to have civil war. That may not happen if you have a strong government and strong military, but who will guarantee that? Let's say, for example, let's say you do this experiment not in Africa, but in West Asia. Let's say you create a West Asia country, which includes Turkey, Iraq. Let's say it includes Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Israel, and Greece. Now, Greece and Turkey, you put them together. That's a volatile combination. You have a nation that includes Greece and Turkey. That is a recipe for disaster, my dear friends. Okay? That's a recipe for disaster. The Greeks and Turks hate each other. You include Armenia in that, it's going to be another recipe for disaster because the Turks want to kill off the Armenians. So it doesn't work. It simply can't work. That nation is doomed before it starts. What if you create a nation that includes Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia? Do you think that will work? It can't work. The Saudis and Iraqis are, well, you can say that Iraqis are Arabs and Saudis are obviously Arabs, but Iranians are not Arabs. They're Aryans. You can't put them in a nation that is half Arab. It doesn't work culturally, ethnically. It doesn't work. And it's the Shia Sunni thing also. It won't work. So you see, these artificial conceptions of artificial nations, it can be a bigger disaster than a solution to a problem. So if you look at Africa, we don't know much about Africa because we haven't taught about it. But if you transpose that solution to other parts of the world, it immediately becomes glaringly clear it's not going to work, right? So this thought experiment, if it had been conducted in Africa, it probably would not have given the desired results. First of all, because of the fact that so many of these tribes and ethnic groups and all, they have their ancient rivalries and issues and problems. And also then the question becomes, who rules this artificial country? If a guy from this ethnic group rules it, the other people will feel aggrieved. If a guy from that ethnic group rules it, then these people will feel aggrieved, and you can't satisfy them all. So ideally, you should have countries based on a single culture, civilization, or ethnic group, right? Sometimes religion, I suppose, but religion doesn't always solve those problems. So it may not have worked out. That's the point I'm making. All right. Okay, Malik Sayyad says, I live in Deccan, part of India. My family is a Sayyad family, which has a lineage going back to the Prophet of Islam. And we are believed to be the descendants of the Prophet. I've heard from my maternal side that my ancestors from the maternal side were Shia Sayyad people from Yemen, who migrated to the Deccan in India, Deccan region of India, about 4 centuries ago, 400 years ago. And from my paternal side, I have heard that my paternal ancestry dates back to the migration of Sayyid family from Baghdad, Mashhad, Isfahan, that area of Persia, about 1,000 years ago to India because of oppression and killing of Sayyads. Hindu kings wrote letters and invited us to India and gave us shelter after hearing the oppression to us caused by nobility of lineage. How true are these migration patterns? We have records that show migration of Sayyid imams to various parts of India, such as Lucknow, Hyderabad, Bidar, Kashmir, etc. Always grateful and thankful for India for letting us live here and settle here. All right. So we know that there are these old records, or at least stories passed down in families over generations of migrations from, let's say, from Yemen, from Baghdad, from Mashhad, from Isfahan. So Yemen is obviously south of the Arabian Peninsula. Baghdad is the historic capital of Mesopotamia, Iraq, right? Then you have Mashhad, Isfahan, etc. These are major cities in Turkey. In in Persia, in Iran, right? So Yemen is Arabic. Baghdad is Mesopotamia, which is now Arabic. Then you have Mashhad and Isfahan, which is Persian, which is Aryan. So so these are the places from which clearly people did indeed over the past several centuries migrate to India and settle in India. And obviously, if that's happened, you're going to have stories passed on over the generations and families, right? But can we verify these migration patterns, these narratives? We know that there has been historically proven, well attested migration from West Asia, various parts of West Asia, to India. Small numbers of people migrating and settling in various parts of India, right? But how precise are specific claims? That from my mother's side, let's say 400 years ago, there was migration from so and so place. How precisely can you corroborate that? Or maybe from my father's side, 1,000 years ago, they came from whatever, Isfahan or wherever. Can you actually precisely verify that? This unbroken and the claim of the unbroken descent from the Prophet of Islam. Can you confirm that in detail? You cannot specifically corroborate the precise claims, but the broad migration patterns are reasonably well known and well established. So if we look at, for example, we have, various genetic research papers do exist that kind of speak about this in broad terms. There is this research paper called Origins of the Indian Sayyad Tribe, a Genetic Perspective by Zahid Hussain, who is, this is a Pakistani person, Government College, University Lahore. Origins of the Indian Sayyad Tribe, Genetic Perspective, and you can read the whole thing. So it does kind of confirm that, people in various parts of India, including the Deccan region, they do have some ancestry from West Asia. Now, everybody who claims West Asian ancestry will not have it. Actually, it's a minority of people who claim West Asian ancestry who will have it. So, in the Deccan region, we have historically known that Persian and Arabic origin people settled in places like Bijapur, Golconda, Hyderabad, etc. Right? And obviously, if they settle from those regions, you're going to have some. And today's people today, the descendants today, will have a little bit of West Asian ancestry, but it definitely indicates there is a direct lineage that comes from West Asia for those people, even if only 3% of your overall ancestry today or DNA today is of West Asian origin. The rest will be obviously of subcontinental origin, but you still have a direct lineage. But so that is about the Deccan region. Then also you have clusters of Sayyid communities in Lucknow region and whatnot that came from maybe Iran or Iraq, that sort of place in West Asia. And in the Islamic societies, there were these genealogical practices for Sayyid families, where families kept detailed records of their ancestry, right? And the thing is that having Sayyid ancestry or belonging to Sayyid family, which means you are a descendant of the Prophet, it is a prestigious thing in Islamic communities, right? So sometimes these trees, these genetic trees or these trees of lineage that were written, they became tools of status. If you could show a genetic lineage or a lineage that traced all the way back to Prophet Muhammad, then it was very prestigious. So sometimes it's been known that some people would kind of sometimes edit that and make it make it work like that to become an elite person in Islamic society and so on. So it's known that we have some communities in India, whether it's in the Deccan or in North India, where you have higher incidence of West Asian ancestry. See, most Indian Muslims have zero West Asian ancestry. Most Indian Muslims are 100% subcontinental in terms of their DNA. But there are specific clusters of people in various parts of India who do have known West Asian ancestry, right? So that is known, but you can't know for sure whether you are descended from the Prophet, and you can't trace it back entirely. That's the point. So if your family has passed down the knowledge of its descent over many generations from both sides, then I think you should, instead of trying to verify it, which is not going to happen, you should, I think, cherish it, right? That you know more about your ancestry than most people do. I mean, how many people in the world today know what their great grandfather's name was, what he or she did, what he did, right? How many? 2 generations ago, you had 4 grandparents. 3 generations ago, you had what? 8 grandparents. 10 generations ago, you can do the math. So you have so many sources of ancestry, and knowing even one of those, like 400 years ago, 1,000 years ago, it's a big deal. So you can't really trace it back. You can't really corroborate it. You can't really verify it. But it is known that you have clusters of population groups in India who have elevated West Asian ancestry compared to the rest of Indians who don't have it. So that's what I can say. I don't have a specific answer to you, but it is known through genetic studies. There are people in India who have West Asian ancestry. So maybe you are that. In that case, some of your ancestors did come from those parts of the world, which is fantastic. Yeah. So we also glad to have you. What can I say? Glad to have you. All right. Rinigan says, why did Pamhiba change his name to Garib Nawaz? Isn't it a coincidence? When Aurangzeb almost conquered the whole of India, much of the subcontinent in 1705, Pamhiba was ruling Manipur from 1709 to 1748. Assam was occupied by the Mughals for a short period of time, but Manipur was the only major Hindu kingdom with a large land area, which the Mughals could not occupy. Right. What was Pamhiba's original name? Was it Chingtangkhomba? What was it? Let me see. I don't recall exactly what was his actual real name. Pamhiba. Yeah, he called himself Garib Nawaz. His dad was Pitambar Charairongba. And his actual name, his name was Pamhiba, and he was also called Gopal Singh. And at some point in time, he decided that he will be called Garib Nawaz. His dad's name was King Pitambar Charairongba. So why did Pamhiba? Okay, first of all, I just took a look at Wikipedia. For convenience, always remember Wikipedia is not necessarily a reliable source of information. Now, why did Pamhiba change his name to Garib Nawaz? I think it was the Turkic and Persian influence. Essentially the whole of the subcontinent was occupied by the Turks under Aurangzeb, right? So there was a lot of Turkic and Persian influence all across India. And I suppose Pamhiba did not really realize that this is not exactly a term that is Indian in origin, perhaps. Right? And it's a term that it's not Indian. I suppose he just, maybe that influence came in through Bengal, because Manipur was strongly influenced from Bengal, right? um, Shantidas Gosai, and who else? I forget the names. All the Gaudiya Vaishnav, you know, the people who propagated Gaudiya Vaishnavism into Manipur. I think Shantidas Gosai was one of those people. So they came from Bengal. Bengal was under strong Turkic influence at the time, maybe occupation as well, right? So these things, they percolate into common usage. And Garib Nawaz means he who helps the Garib people and all that, right? Something like that. So I suppose he thought that, this is a nice name to have. Let me call myself Garib Nawaz. It is definitely not a Manipuri name. It's not an Indian term. Not a Manipuri. It's not a term that originates in the Manipuri language, the Maithili language. It's obviously not a term that originates in any Indian languages. It's obviously either probably Persian or Turkic. Not Turkic, either Persian or Arabic. So that's the influence that foreign occupation has on a society, culture, civilization, right? Amisha says, why is Indo-European called Indo-Germanic in German? Since it doesn't just include Indian and Germanic languages. I think that it's obviously a leftover of the 19th century. In the 19th century, it was the Germans who, created, let's say, the field of Indology. The Germans were very interested in India. The Germans, they sought to steal Indian heritage. Why and how? You see, Germany doesn't have its own history. Germany was never unified ever before 1871 as a single kingdom, a single empire, or a single civilization, single culture ever. There's always a small, fragmented bunch of kingdoms and principalities and duchies and whatnot. It's only in 1871 that it was unified as a single entity by the Iron Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. So the Germans sought some kind of legitimacy for their culture, whatever, not civilization. They don't have a civilization, but they sought something that gave them an air of antiquity. So one thing they proposed or claimed is that all the Nordic languages are Germanic languages, Teutonic, Germanic, whatever. So the Danish language, the Norwegian language, the Swedish language, etc. These are all Germanic language. English is Germanic, right? So the idea was they put forth at the time, and it was very successfully received everywhere, is that all these Northern European languages are Germanic languages. And these are the languages that are at the extreme western end of Europe. And it was very clear that the oldest of all these languages that are all interrelated was Sanskrit. In the far east, from where they were sitting, it's far, far in the east, India, right? So the idea was that there is one single language family. All the way east in India, you have the Indian languages, of which Sanskrit is the oldest. And all the way west in the European realm, we have the Germanic language, the other extreme, the western extreme. So India in the east, the Germanic language in the west. That's why they called this language family Indo-Germanic. Obviously, it also included the Romance languages, the Italic languages, the Slavic languages, the Persian language, and so much more. But the two extremes, they said, one is Indian, one is Germanic, so let's call it Indo-Germanic. And I think even today they call it Indo-Germanic in German. In the other languages, English, etc., it's called Indo-European. But the Germans, I think they still call it Indo-Germanic. Let's see. Indo-Germanish. Let's see. Indo-Germanish. Is it like that? Indo-Germanic, Germanisch Sprachen. Indo-Germanish, German for Indo-Germanic is a traditional German term for the traditional German term for the Indo-European language family. Blah, 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 etc., etc., etc. Synonym, linguistic scope. Indo-Germanish is the German scientific term for the Indo-European language family, etc. So they still use this term, Indo-Germanish. Then you have and blah, 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 blah. So, okay, some other people are also asking this question, whatever. Okay. So that's the deal. That's about Indo-Germanic. And the Germans, they sought to steal Indian cultural, civilizational ideas and assign them to German. So that's why the Aryan invasion theory was invented. That it was very well known that Sanskrit is the oldest of the Indo-European languages by far. But then Max Muller proposed the idea that, The Indians are brown people, but their ancestors were white because the original Indians were black. And their white ancestors came from the Germanic speaking world, the Aryan world. So that's why the Aryan race is the greatest race, and the real Aryans are the white people. They stole the term Arya from India and Persia. And they stole the whole language family. Because Germany did not have a real history of its own. So it sought to steal Indian history. I'm not saying all Germans do this. It's the German intellectuals, so-called intellectuals. Even today, their geneticists try to harp on about the Aryan invasion theory and somehow seek to support it. Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, picnic, alien invasion theory, whatever you want to call it. Okay. Nirvana Shanks says the Ming dynasty isolated itself from the world despite having a strong naval capacity. How did this choice affect China's future global role? Well, what an important question. What a prescient question. The Ming dynasty. It's 1300s, 1400s. Is it? Let's and Zhang He, the Chinese admiral. Am I right? 1300s, 1400s. Let's see. Okay, Ming dynasty. Ming dynasty. 1300s, 1400s. Yeah, see, I was right. 1300s. So 1368 to 1644. Now, what about Zhang He? That guy was late 1300s, early 1400s, if I am not mistaken. I'm usually bad with dates. Let me see if I turn out to be right. Zhang He. Yes, late 1300s, early 1400s. I was right once again. See, I'm right when it comes to dates, approximately. I don't bother to memorize dates, but I'm approximately correct with dates. So you have the Ming dynasty, 1300s to 1600s, and they had a good naval capacity. They could build pretty large ships, pretty massive ships, and put weapons that were reasonably scary on those ships, reasonably advanced technology for its time. And they could send entire flotillas of those ships together, task forces together. And they had a great admiral, the Hui general, Zhang He, who was also a eunuch. A eunuch is a person who has undergone a certain surgical procedure. The Chinese practice. Charming. So Zhang He was this eunuch admiral, and he was sent by the Chinese Ming dynasty on several expeditions to discover the world and to project Chinese power. And one of the places that they did this was Sri Lanka, and they also, I suppose, went to East Africa and so on, allegedly, if I'm not mistaken. You can look it up. So during the Ming dynasty, the Chinese had significant naval capabilities, and they had the ability to travel far and wide and project power as well, military power, right? And then later Ming kings, emperors, whatever you want to call them, they decided to no longer exercise or use the Chinese naval capacity. Shut it down. Not interested. They decided to focus on the land borders. They decided to focus on keeping an eye on Mongolia, because Mongolia is powerful. Yes, very powerful. They had already been burned by the Mongols before. Shri Chinggis Khan, Shri Kublai Khan, and so on. So they said, okay, we will now focus on the land borders. We will defend the land borders. We will turn inwards. We'll become insular. We'll forget about the sea stuff, ocean stuff. Why do we need to do all this? Kya milta hai isse? What's the big deal? Forget about it. And so they voluntarily, essentially dismantled their naval capabilities. So we are talking about this. So the Ming dynasty lasts until the 1600s, right? So that's by the 1600s, it's clear that they have dismantled, essentially, voluntarily, the Chinese naval capabilities. What's the outcome of this long-term outcome? So let's say 1640, they have dismantled the Chinese naval capabilities. Go forward a couple of hundred years, 1840s. What does China face? Naval invasions from the Europeans. The Europeans did not dismantle naval capabilities. They built on top of their existing naval capabilities. Europe was far away from China. China did not even know that Europe existed, mostly. But 200 years after this, after the Ming dynasty, the Chinese find that the Europeans have super advanced naval capabilities. They have militarized those naval capabilities. They have created a world order that is Eurocentric in nature. They dominate the seas. They decide what happens on the seas. They decide who controls the trade routes and who can use the trade routes. And they are now imposing terms on China. That is the beginning of the Chinese century of humiliation. So, because the Ming dynasty voluntarily dismantled its naval capabilities, China had to pay a huge, huge price 200 years later. Huge price. A century of humiliation. How stupid does it look in hindsight? It may have made sense when the Ming emperor decided we don't need to do this anymore. But 200 years later, it looked so stupid. And it was a terrible decision. If the Chinese had expanded on their naval capabilities, they would have pushed the Europeans out of the ocean. But that's not what happened. So these small choices make such a huge difference. Today, India is treating ISRO with a stepmotherly treatment. We have the space capabilities. We are choosing to disregard them. 5 space launches, 5 rocket launches a year, 6 rocket launches a year. PSLV is failing. Who cares? Space? Jane do. Who cares? So that took 200 years. This will take 20 years in the 21st century. In the 21st century, all the time scales are compressed. In 20 years, you will need a visa to go to space. The Americans will say, ISRO wants to do a space launch, apply for permission, wait in line for 6 months. What will you do then? Unless we build a permanent presence in space, in which case they can't do a thing. But no, we are just snoozing right now. We are going backwards. So this is a cautionary tale. The Ming dynasty's decision to isolate itself and shut down its naval capability. That's exactly what we are doing with ISRO. We are not taking it forward. It's just floating wherever it is. Zero ambition from the government of India right now. It's distressing to see. Next question. Amisha says, why did the Imperial Japanese keep the French colonial regime in power during their occupation of Indochina? We're talking about 1940, 1941, right? The Japanese Empire has marched across Asia westwards, and they have now conquered Indochina. And yet they allowed the French colonial regime to stay in power. What is Indochina? What is Indochina? It's Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. That's Indochina. Where's the map? We go to the map and we'll talk about that. All right. Okay. Where is it? Where is map? We put map on the screen. We talk about Indochina. So Indochina is today's Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. That is Indochina, and it was ruled by the French. So in 1940, 1941, the Japanese roll in and they take control of the place, and they allow the French government to remain in power. Why is that, is the question. See, at the time, the Japanese, their objective was to prevent the Allies. The Allies means the British and the Americans, right? Mainly. Now, the Allies, where did they exist in Asia? In India. The British occupied India at the time. They had been occupying India for 2.5 centuries, very brutally. And as a consequence, the Americans were able to use various air bases in various parts of India to supply Chinese forces against Japan. So the Japanese intended to cut off these supplies, the Allied ability to resupply China. And so they wanted to, as a consequence, use Indochina as a staging base for a further invasion westwards, eventually into Burma, eventually into India, and possibly into China as well. Okay? Now the thing is this: in 1940, the French government that ruled Indochina, it was the Vichy government. The Vichy government was under Nazi control. See, in the beginning of the Second World War, very quickly, the Germans were able to conquer and occupy France. And they set up a puppet regime in France, in Paris. The Vichy regime, which was a collaborator regime of that actually served the Nazis, that served Nazi Germany. So the French government at the time served Nazi Germany. And this was the French government that was ruling Indochina. And the Japanese were aligned or allied with the Nazis. So instead of removing this government that was technically allied with them, they said, you know what, we will simply use Indochina as a place, as a base from which we will launch further invasions for the westwards and northwards. And We don't want to take the trouble of setting up a new government and doing all that in Indochina. Let the French do the job. We don't want to bring in thousands of more Japanese to administer the place. We just want to use the place as a base from which to launch further invasions. So it made sense to allow the French to do whatever they're doing, and simply use Indochina as a place from which to, as a springboard from which to launch further invasions. Of course, eventually the Japanese did a regime change even there in Indochina. Yeah. What, 44, 45, around that time. That's when the tide had turned. Right? Right. Okay. Divodas Putra says, I was driving alone in deep snow in heavy snowfall when I heard you made that comment on quantum dance. It cracked me up so bad I almost skid. I hope you're okay. I hope you didn't completely skid. Tell us a bit about how the US made the Philippines its colony. How did a post-colonial state end up owning its own colony? Post-colonial state, the US, ended up owning a colony of its own. The Philippines. Where is the Philippines? Let's go to the maps quickly and find out where the Philippines are. The Philippines are over here, north of Indonesia. This archipelago. Okay, that is the Philippines. South of Taiwan, east of Vietnam, across the Champa Sea, or the so-called South China Sea, and north of Indonesia, and that's the Philippines. So the Philippines were occupied by the United States. Okay, how did that happen? Well, you see, for the longest time, the Philippines were occupied by Spain. Spain. Then the Filipino people said, we are tired of Spanish occupation and colonization of Philippines. The evil, nasty people. So the Filipinos rose up in revolt against Spain. And they fought the Spaniards militarily, and they set up a parallel rebel government in the Philippines. 1898 or somewhere. At the time, the US also fought the Spaniards, and they defeated the Spaniards. And then they signed a treaty in Paris, the Americans with the Spaniards. In this treaty, they gave the US gave Spain $20 million or whatever it was to purchase Philippines, and completely disregarded the fact that the Filipino people had set up their own government. So the Filipino people had set up their own government in the Philippines, but the Americans simply bought the Philippines from Spain after defeating Spain in a war. The Americans do this. They buy the Louisiana Purchase, the Alaska Purchase, the Philippines Purchase. Now they're talking about the Greenland Purchase. They simply do that. So they bought the nation and the people. They bought the people to the Americans. This is the history of the Americans. Okay. So 1898, they buy the Philippines from Spain. And then the Filipinos say, no, we will not be treated as a possession. So they fight the Americans. And that fight goes on for a while. And the Americans do all kinds of nasty, brutal things to the Filipinos. Okay? And that's how the Americans made the Philippines their own colony. And they imposed English on the Filipinos, and they imposed further Christianity on the Filipinos, and the American style of education, and so on. And this entire situation went on until the Japanese occupied the Philippines in the Second World War. Eventually, Japan lost, and 1945 or thereabouts, the Philippines were freed again from the Japanese, come again under American occupation. And then the Americans say, okay, let's move out of this place in 1946. So 1946 is when the Philippines actually become independent, but they still have American naval bases and so on, Subic Bay and whatnot. So that's the short form of the story of how the Philippines became a colony of the Americans. Okay. Amisha says, did pockets of paganism survive in medieval Europe after Christianization? Yes, they did. See, Christianity was imposed on the Europeans by force. But even though it was imposed by force, it was difficult to control the Europeans. So what the Christians would do, the Christian converters and colonizers and the church officials and all, what they would do is, the Europeans had their ancient religion, which was nothing but a continuation of the Indian Vedic religion. The same religion in different shapes and forms, same gods and goddesses in different shapes and forms. So the Europeans had this practice of having temples. They had this practice of having sacred mounds and hills. They had the practice of having sacred wells and sacred groves of trees. So the Christians would do what? They would destroy the pre-Christian temples and build a church there, so that the worship would be continuous in the same place, and it will be easier to convince the Europeans, to keep worshipping in the same sacred place. But now it's a church, and it's Jesus Christ. It's no longer your gods and goddesses. Similarly, the practice, there was something called bad Christianity or something, in which various pre-Christian traditions were continued within Christianity. Certain places were regarded as sacred. Everyone knew that these are pre-Christian sacred places and all, and that also continued. And some parts of Europe simply did not become Christian for a very long time. Certain Slavic regions became Christian only in the 19th century or 18th or 19th centuries. Lithuania barely became Christian. Lithuania and all, they continued many pagan traditions as syncretic traditions within Christianity. There are many cathedrals that have clearly non-Christian symbols in them. In Russia, in the Slavic regions, like I said, there were many places where Christianity barely existed. It was just barely practiced. There was this very famous Russian Orthodox Christian monk called Rasputin. He was regarded as a pagan, so strong were his pagan practices. So yeah, it was like that in different parts of Europe. The church tried to hammer everybody into submission, and they tried to impose Christianity everywhere, but it succeeded at different levels in different places. In some places, you had clear syncretism and various sacred festivals, pre-Christian festivals, were then absorbed into Christianity, and Christian symbolism was superimposed on top of those. The winter solstice is what? December 22 or something, but it was turned into December 25, Christmas, that sort of thing. 22, 23 is the solstice, right? Which is the winter solstice? One second. Give me a second. I'm sure it's December 22/23. Winter solstice. 21 December. Okay, so a few days ago. So that was turned into Christmas, December 25. Maybe it was 25 earlier, maybe 2000 years ago, whatever it was. So that's what was done. And a lot of these pre-Christian practices somehow managed to survive despite the Christianization and so on. So you had pockets of paganism which did survive in Europe after Christianization or despite the Christianization. And in the 20th century, you had the revival of pre-Christian religions and so on. In the Nordic countries, you have something called Asatru, which is a revivalist form of the Nordic paganism with the old gods, Thor, Odin, Woden, so on and so forth, Freya, Yggdrasil, and so on. And in the Baltic, no, in the Lithuania, Latvia region, you have the revival of Romuva, which is the old religion, and it sometimes they have to bring in priests from outside. Okay, Romuva. So it's a neo-pagan religion, based on the old culture and religion of Lithuania, and sometimes they have to bring in priests from outside of Europe, priests who know the old traditions better. For example, one second, let's open that. Give me a second. So sometimes for practicing the Romuva religion, they have to bring in priests from outside who know the old traditions and religion better. So here you have a Hindu priest officiating at a Romuva ritual, because it is the same religion, by the way, FYI, right? So yeah, it's kind of still survives, and some people are trying to revive the old culture, which, well, good for them. I wish them the best. And I still have multiple more questions, but I've gone significantly beyond the 2-hour mark. So let me end this here and let me see if, okay. And now I can see that I've got 19 super chats that I need to take up. So let's quickly go through the super chats and then we shall call it a day. Minimalist Maverick says, with Iran regime change, will IRGE become next UA for Russia? With Iran regime change, will Iran become the next Ukraine for Russia? No, it won't. Very unlikely. Namaste Pranam. Thank you very much. Thank you. Mac 4 says, after new UGC rules, do you think BJP is equally compromises Congress? No action by them on illegal immigrants, feeling depressed about Hindu future. Look, as you all know very well, I don't need to remind you all, I do not comment about internal matters of India. What I can say is that the UGC rules, new rules, whatever I'm seeing, are terrible. Terrible. They seek to create a permanent divide in India. Oppressor and oppressed. Okay? So certain categories of people are forever oppressed, and certain categories of people are forever oppressors. So those who are being labeled as oppressors, you can make any allegation about them, and they have to pay the price. People will just simply leave the country if this is brought into effect. So I think it's terrible. I don't know what the government of India is doing. That's all I'll say about this. Namaste Pranam says, core difference between Venezuela and Iran. One fell, the other didn't. Iran is way more powerful than Venezuela. Iran can hit back. Iran can hit back very strongly. It has very large stockpiles of very, very, very capable missiles. Iran sits on massive oil reserves. Iran can destroy the oil wells of all the surrounding countries if it wants. Iran has a lot of leverage, that Venezuela doesn't. So that's the core difference. Brute Cole says, I'm an undergraduate student in chemistry at IIT. Want to pursue MS in quantum information technologies abroad. Please tell me whether I should go to China, West, or Japan. Also tell about its future scope. Okay, listen. I don't know about the landscape, the educational landscape when it comes to quantum information technology. I think the US will be the best country for that, I'm sure. The Chinese also, of course, are trying to catch up with the US in every technology you can imagine. Quantum information technology is very, very, very cutting edge field. So I'm sure China has great opportunities, educational opportunities when it comes to quantum information technologies. Obviously, I'm guessing. I have not seen. I don't look into these things. I don't look into which country offers the best education opportunities and so on and so forth. I don't look into that. I'm not in that field, but I am pretty sure it must be there in China. So you need to do your own research. You need to do your own due diligence. Okay, the US probably will be the best place to study this. China may be the next best, possibly. Japan, I'm not sure. Japan is not allowed to do research in certain technologies, so I'm not sure. So West, definitely the US, number one place. Number two will be China. I don't know about Australia. I don't think Australia may be the right place for this. When it comes to Europe, I would say I'm not sure. Germany, whatever. I think I would say it's either the US or China. Definitely nothing in India, I'm sure. Okay, so all the best. Do well. Make the right choice. Do your research properly. And do well. I wish you success. All the best. Ganpati says, is it true that India has left? Yes, India has left. India has liquidated its stake in Chabahar. It's given whatever the money it was worth to Iran. So for all the bravado that Jaishankar gives about strategic autonomy, also, have you observed this historical pattern where when Iran falls, India falls next? We should help Iran. There's nothing we can do to help. So first of all, India has liquidated its stake in Chabahar port. When we were faced with US pressure, we had to do that. So we have caved in. Wise thing to do. Okay, there's nothing we could have done to stop this. We would have paid a price, way more tariffs on India. And anyway, if the Americans do a regime change or destroy the Chabahar port, what do we do? Best to exit it. It is the wise thing to do. India is a weak nation right now, relatively much weaker than the US. This is the best thing we can do. See, the past 10, 15 years, India has been doing the exact opposite of hide your strength and bide your time. India has been doing the exact opposite of that extremely unwisely. India has this tendency of boasting instead of keeping quiet. So now it's all gonna fall flat. But we are still a sovereign nation. But the beginning of vassalhood starts. How does it start? When your foreign policy actions start being dictated by outsiders. And that's what's happened here for India. Until now, our leaders have been saying, right, no third party can tell us what we will do. We decide what to do. No longer the case. This is a very dangerous sign. This is how vassalhood begins. I'm not saying India is becoming a vassal right now, but this is how it begins. A historical pattern where when Iran falls, India falls next. Well, it's happened once. The Arabic invasions, right? Yeah, Iran fell, then India fell. We should help Iran. We can help Iran if we are a powerful nation. We can't even help the Hindus of Bangladesh. We can't even help the Hindus of Pakistan. We can't even prevent the Chinese from interfering in Nepal. And we want to help Iran? Not going to happen. We're not strong enough. Facts. Facts. Aryan Shukla says, what are the losses due to internet shutdown like in Iran? Can they keep it down for a longer time? What are the losses? What kind of losses? What are the losses due to internet shutdown like in Iran? Can they keep it down for a longer time? The Iranian government can keep internet shut down as long as it wants, right? It controls the internet in its country. It's a sovereign nation. The government decides what happens. They can keep it down for the next 3 months if they want. What are the losses? I have no idea what are the losses. What kind of losses? Do Iranian businesses depend on the internet? I'm not sure about that. So the government of Iran can keep it down as long as they want. 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, whatever. It's their choice. Losses, I have no idea, sir. I have no idea. Abhirab Shorkar says, could you or someone you know at some point start a channel for rare earths or metallurgy or semiconductors? I can't. I'm not an expert in this domain. Somebody I know, I don't know any experts in this domain. I may know some people who are in IITs or whatever, but they are doing IIT work. They won't start channels doing this. So, and it's a very niche topic. Rare earths or metallurgy. Anyway, I'll see if I can talk to somebody. If maybe you can start it. I'm not the person to do it because I'm not an expert in this. I can be an expert in this if I spend the next 3 to 6 months studying it, because I have the background to understand this. Maybe not even 3 months, probably a couple of months of intensive study. I could definitely have expert level knowledge in this because I have the physics background, but it's not for me. Anyway, thank you for the suggestion. I'll see if something can be done. Jagjit Midda says, what drives wars, national interest or arms lobby? Both can drive wars. Sometimes in some nations, the arms lobby can also supersede the national interest. Right. In an ideal world, everything is driven by the national interest, or everything should be driven by the national interest. But in some nations, you may have a situation where vested interests supersede the national interest, and or they construe their interest as a national interest. In that case, if it's an arms lobby, they can start wars. So it can happen, right? It's not an ideal world we live in. So arms lobbies can indeed spark wars or drive wars at times. Yeah. Dheeraj Kamath says, is Bahrain on red alert now in case of US war with Iran? I think all the nations in the West Asia region are on high alert. What nations are these? Let's quickly take a look at the map. Okay. All of the nations are on high alert. Looks like the US was planning a strike on Iran, and then they backed down at the last minute. I'd say that Saudi Arabia will definitely be on high alert. So will be Kuwait, UAE, Oman, Iraq for sure. Turkey will be on high alert. Israel will be on high alert. I suppose Pakistan will go on high alert if the US tells them to. And Bahrain is this little nation here. Qatar is on high alert for sure. They have this Al Udaid or whatever base there, right? And Bahrain also, I suppose, will be on high alert. Everybody, all the nations in this region right now, because there's a possibility of a US-led, action on Iran. Kiran More says, why did the BJP have a meeting with the Chinese Communist Party? I have not looked into it. Has the BJP issued an official statement as to why this meeting happened? Look, when the Chinese Communist Party is a very major political party, the political party of China, which is the most powerful nation in Asia, and we are the second most powerful nation in Asia. Our largest political party is the BJP. So I suppose there is some kind of political activity happening between the two countries. And the Chinese Communist Party officials who came to India met with the BJP leadership. They also met with the political leadership of other parties. Okay, it's not just the BJP. Understand that. So I'm not exactly sure why, but maybe it's a routine thing. Maybe there is a chance of a rapprochement between the two countries potentially. We'll see about that. Too early to speculate. Dheeraj Kamath says, you say India is like Nigeria, yet India has nukes and fully sovereign. Could you explain the apparent contradiction? India is like Nigeria with nukes and Nigeria with sovereignty. Infrastructure, trash. Education, garbage. Corruption, allegedly very high. You see, manufacturing, what manufacturing? What do we manufacture that we export to the world? Don't say we export raw materials, mangoes, bananas, all that. We're not a banana republic, right? We want to be a full manufacturing power. Are we anything compared to China in terms of manufacturing? No, we are closer to Nigeria. Living standards are closer to Nigeria than to China. So it's like Nigeria with nukes and full sovereignty. Same kind of trash education system, comparable. Trash living standards. Infrastructure is being built in India now. That's one thing the government has done very well, this government, the past 10 years. But look at the living standards, the quality of life in the streets. Look at the pollution, right? So I'm not saying that India hasn't changed. India has changed a lot in the past 10 years, but we are still, I mean, look at the per capita GDP in India and compare it with Nigeria. Okay, let's see. 1 second. Per capita GDP, India, Nigeria. Let's see. So India is 2.7. What? Okay, so India is like 2 or 3 times that of Nigeria, but not like an order of magnitude higher. So it is a real difference if it's an order of magnitude higher. So you see, overall, India is like that. India has still got the GDP per capita of overall similar to Africa, right? That's what it is. Godliness says, what made Trump cancel the so-called help he promised the Iranians? Also, with Chabahar gone, are we fully encircled? Bhutanese PM was in Mar-a-Lago. Oh, was he in Mar-a-Lago? Okay. Are we fully encircled? Not yet. Not quite fully encircled. Chabahar essentially gone. What made Trump cancel the so-called help he promised the Iranians? I think what I'm hearing is that the Saudis and the UAE said that, you know what, this is not a good idea because we will suffer as a consequence. If the Americans attack Iran, Iran will attack all the American bases in the region and all the oil refineries in the region. Of course they will. Of course they will. Right? So Saudi Arabia will suffer. Doesn't make sense for them to suffer like that. And maybe they were able to convince the Americans. Are we fully encircled? Not quite, but we are getting there. We are getting there. East Pakistan gone, West Pakistan gone, Nepal gone. Bhutan can be bought out easily by the Americans. No question about that. So we'll see. Maybe fully encircled soon. It is what it is. That's how it goes. Died in plane crash says, many on Russian social media allege that Shoigu turned the defense ministry into his personal harem, as a lot of young women without any mile XP were given positions. Even trolling using terms like reindeer herders harem. Okay, I have absolutely no idea about this. I have absolutely no idea. I don't think Mr. Putin would tolerate anything like this, actually. So I'm not aware of this. Sorry. Okay. Smith Sarkar. Well, thank you very much, Smith Sarkar. Thank you very much. And Smith Sarkar again. Thank you very much again. Okay. Smith Sarkar says, India's persistent internal divisions and weak state cohesion. Is it time to acknowledge that secularism and liberal democracy are unsuitable for us? Absolutely, 100%. But what can we do about it? Because the folks who come to power through secularism and democracy, they will not give up power. They will never change the system. You see, there's secularism and democracy were brought into India as solutions to the alleged problems that we had in India at the time of independence and partition, right? So what happened is that the folks to whom the British transferred power, they put in place a permanent solution for a temporary problem. A permanent solution to a temporary problem becomes a permanent problem. This is what we are seeing now. India's democracy is further widening the divisions the British have created. Right? These divisions are artificial. They were created by the British. And today's politicians are exploiting these divisions to play politics and get votes. And they are further widening the divisions. And weak state cohesion, too much federalism, too weak of a central government overall. Democracy has been a disaster for India. Disaster. And pandering to the majority, to the lowest common denominator, that sort of thing. It's been an absolute disaster. It's causing a gradual, consistent lowering of India's standards. Not the standards aren't being raised; they are being lowered. Rohil says, besides the obvious global powers like India first, China, Russia, and the US, it should be Russia. It should be US, Russia, China, then India. Okay, but despite besides these obvious global powers, do you think there's a country silently rising that could become a future superpower we're not noticing? See, you have listed four, right? India, China, Russia, and the US. Out of these four, only three can potentially. One is already a superpower, the US. Only China and Russia are in competition to perhaps someday be a superpower. India is not in the competition for being a superpower right now. Okay? And there is no country silently rising that can be a future superpower someday. I don't see any. India is not in the race for being superpower. Okay, please understand this. Okay, CVS2K says Sun Party. Sun Party. All right. Thank you for being a member for a month. Thank you so much. Sam the Gamer says, what's your favorite car, diesel or petrol? My favorite car is powered by antimatter. No, I don't have a favorite car. Diesel, petrol, fossil fuels, very bad, very naughty, very nasty. Electric or antimatter. Even nuclear will work, but nuclear reactors are too large. DT Sharma. Thank you very much, DT Sharma. Thank you indeed. Shivarale says, India opens monument conservation to private agencies, ending ASI's exclusive control. And is William Dalrymple a good author to read books about Indian history? India opens monument conservation to private agencies. Has that happened? Let us find out. That will be great. It will be very welcome from my perspective. India opens monument conservation to private agencies. Okay, in a significant policy shift, the government of India has decided to open the conservation of all of centrally protected monuments to empaneled private agencies, ending the ASI's exclusive role in restoration work. I think that's an interesting move and probably a good move, as long as they are able to ensure that these private agencies do a good job. Not like the ASI is doing a stellar job by any means, but okay. Okay, so interesting. Is William Dalrymple a good author to read books about Indian history? I am not a fan of William Dalrymple, the fat Scotsman. Yeah. I have nothing against him being fat or whatever, but the point is, I am not a fan of the guy. Okay. He's no expert on Indian history. And he takes sides in Indian politics and whatnot. He should stay out of Indian politics. I am not a fan of his. All I'll say is that I haven't read a single book of his. So probably I'm not the right guy to answer the question. My point is, I'm not a fan of the person, because he is biased against India. He takes sides. He takes the side of the left in the Indian history scene. And when you take the side of the Indian left, instead of being neutral and putting forth information in a neutral perspective, from a neutral perspective, then you are on the side of those who have been for decades distorting Indian history. And of course, this is his business, so he seeks to sell as many books as possible. So he's put forth narratives like the true narrative this time about the fact that the Silk Road is a myth. It was India that was trading with the West, not China. But the West has created this entire illusion of the Silk Road being this great thing. It was India that was the major trader with the West, not China. It was India that was the major economy, not China. So he has written a book about the Silk Road. I haven't read it. This time, clearly, he's telling the truth. But a lot of his history is, yeah. So I haven't read a single book of his. So I can't really say, but not a fan of his. Feel Strongman says, I passed with minus 35 in my postgraduate exam. I'm on my way to do kidney operation. Can I get your blessings and full support, sir? Full support indeed. Passed with minus 35 in the PG exam. On your way to do kidney operation. You're a doctor. You're a doctor. You got minus 35 in the postgraduate exam. You're gonna do a kidney operation. All the best. Full support, sir. This is India. This is new India. This is India. Amisha Mishra says, have you kissed the ring? Congrats on 950K. Well, 950K. It's been like months and months and months, and 948, 949, now it's 950. All right. Thank you, ma'am. Have I kissed the ring? I haven't kissed any rings. I do not kiss any rings. I am fully independent, as always. All right. Okay. Died in plane crash says, Milexp means military experience. Okay, military experience. Also, Shoigu had no military experience. Also, the new defense minister Belousov has fired all those useless women from defense ministry. Okay, well, I'm not aware of what's going on inside, behind the scenes, all these women and whatnot. But looks like if this is true, then Shoigu has some answering to do. Yeah, Shoigu had no military experience. Okay, I haven't looked into these details, but interesting indeed. Well, thank you for bringing this to my notice. I will do some digging into this. And that brings me to the end of today's question and answer session. I've taken in as many of the Q&As as possible from the comments and a bunch of super chats as well. Rudra says, great content. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. And I'll take one final question. Ayush, don't you feel jealous about how powerful the US is compared to other nations? The number of vassals is unmatched. It kidnaps presidents without any thinking. I'm indeed very jealous indeed. But what can I do? Yeah, what can I do? I am indeed jealous. I wish my country was like that. But my country has different standards. Our leaders have different standards. So what can we say? That's where we are. All right, people, thank you so much for being on the live stream, for all your questions. I look forward to doing your... Okay, there's one more super chat. V for Valor says, today's episode made me sad about India. Well, so you see, I wish I did not make you sad about India. But I will not lie to you. I will tell you the truth. The truth isn't always nice. Yeah. But I'm still optimistic about India. I am hopeful that we will not go down the road of becoming a vassal, despite the odds being stacked against us. I think it's a 65-70% chance that in the next 5 years we become a US vassal. But I'm hopeful that the 30% chance comes out on top. So I'm still optimistic. Yeah, let's all be optimistic. The odds are against us now. The Americans are way too powerful, way more powerful than us. But let's hope that we still remain sovereign as a nation. So don't be sad, work hard and hope for the best. All right. So people, thank you so much, everybody. And I look forward to talking to you in tomorrow's live stream, which is going to be entirely a live chat, super chat. Look forward to that. Until then, take care. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep raising your standards.